All right, folks, welcome back. It is officially the 308th recorded session involving Duolingo Japanese. We are in day 3. Today is where I wrap up the constructs of the 100 days of Duolingo material. We have 4 constructs to go, and once we complete the 4 constructs, I'm gonna try my best to cover a bunch of topics or existing topics. It's not comprehensive, and it's a little bit it's getting to the later side of things. Usually these are to summarize a bunch of things that come up on a daily basis. So conversations we have, concerns, or maybe frequently asked questions. I'm leaning towards the whole nice trend of frequently asked questions. I'm obviously not swimming in frequently asked questions, so generally speaking, it takes about 100, maybe a good 100 days before I accumulate a collection of questions that I would provide commentary for. Not an opinion or answering them. I typically provide commentary because oftentimes when I say I answer questions, those answers might not necessarily answers, but more observations. I feel thinking that every question has a direct answer is a little bit reductive in the day and age of the internet, right? There's plenty of information. You can probably find the answer in that way as well. So, as a nice little thing, we started a new page because we kind of ran out of space yesterday. So we ran out of space for the stuff that we have done, and then now we moved on to a new set. Now we have 2 little units left. Oh, and I have to correct something. I took a gamble yesterday, and we gotta find it now. I took a gamble yesterday, and I thought hajimeru and hajimaru was a specific radical on top. And turns out, again, I lost the 50-50. Where is it? It's somewhere here. There was one here. Here. So these are not correct. I took a gamble. Not the correct radicals. And there's one other place. I didn't check any others because it got really late. Obviously, not the whole point. This is not the primary point of doing this. It's actually to see where my weaknesses are. So, it's this radical. And that's in, that's because of Chinese. Chinese reminded me, it's like, yeah, I screwed up. I think the other one was somewhere here, right? So much to be responsible for. Does anyone see a hajimaru? Hajimaru is somewhere. Could have sworn it was not over here. So that's feelings. That's place. Wouldn't be in there. Excuse me. That's describing stuff. Groceries, food, nature, clothing. Time, body, health. Here? Chiru, no. Tatameru. Ikeru. Oh, here it is. Yep. And pick up as many errors, you know, when it's convenient. All good. All right. That's the only thing that came to mind with my short amount of time yesterday. Okay. All right. Now let's get back. So, where are we at? Unit 75? Unit 75. Unit 75. That was the city stuff. Lots of city stuff. We'll move a little bit off-centered here. So, lots of city names. Yeah. Yeah. Shibuya. Shibuya. Harajuku. Harajuku. Yeah? Oh, no, wait. That's, Oh, you know, I didn't check if this was 2 or 1 or 3. Oh, it's probably 3. Oh, no. Wait. Hold up. I think I have to go back and correct all of these, too. Does that look too... It's definitely 3. Does 2 look barren? Let's see. 2 looks too barren, right? Yeah, I have to go back and correct these. So I don't know. Basically this means yeah. So this means shikudai. Anytime I wrote shikudai has 1 less stroke. That's fine. We know. Shinjuku. Yeah, I think shikudai uses the same character too for shiku. And yesterday I wasn't sure if it was meh or not really meh, but 3 or 2. I'm pretty sure I decided to choose 2. Okay. Akihabara. Right, Akihabara. Shinjuku. 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 Ikebukuro. Ikebukuro. Thank you, Lily. I should scrunch this up a little. A wee bit. Ikebukuro. Eh? Ikebukuro Yamanote. 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 Ginza. Ginza. Oh no, I didn't check. Dang it, I didn't check this either. Son of a. I didn't check this as well. But there are two things I didn't check. This part. Yeah, this radical and this radical. And we'll stick with that. Yesterday I decided there wasn't that. Alright. Ginza, the golden seat. Silver seat. Ginza. Ginza. Hiroshima. Wide island. Hiroshima. Dang it. My spacing is pretty lackluster right now. Okay. Then we have a bunch of words attached to all things. So, Polsaten. Polsaten sa is 10. Oof, that's a little chunk. Too chunk. Reel it back a little. Kolsaten. Got Taitoshi. Taitoshi. My spacing is like meh. Taitoshi. Toshi. Toshi and also Shuto. Shuto. It's this. Was there? Yes, I think there was a stroke there. Right. Shuto. So Shuto for capital. Shuto. Akihabara had some stuff. Meito. Um, cos, cosu, cosplay, pure, cosplay. Ginza had stuff too. It's kind of long. Sa? Sa. Oh, I messed up Sa before. How'd I messed up Sa? Oh, it's because I went the wrong direction. Sara? Sarari. Sarari. Man. Right. And associated with this was, what is it? Hataraku. 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 It's kind of interesting. It has like the aspect of doing something while also importance and then person. So the work. At least that's what my mnemonics would for Hataraku. Okay, so Sen. Oh, I totally forgot Sen. What the heck is Sen? We'll just pretend it doesn't exist. I don't remember it. Okay. Sen. Nah, I don't remember. Will be things I have forgotten. Hiroba. Yeah? Hiroba. Hiroba. Basho. 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 Jumin. 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 集まる、集まり、集まる。So, that's what. It's people. Okay. Right. And then big. Atsumari and atsumaru. Atsumari, atsumaru. Omu. No, Omu. Omu. Crowded. Omu. Komu. Oops. Kazu. Kazu is the maths. Su. Yeah. Kazu. So Kazu. Kazu Jinko. Inko. Inko. Increase and decrease. Increase and decrease. Increases fueru. Fueru. Fueru and heru. Heru 30. Heru. Yeah. This. Heru. No. That's sis. That's Heru. Heru flexed. Onaka. Onaka is like Onaka. Naka. That's good. Moving right along. Let's pick a new color. Yeet. Okay. Unit 76. 2 more to go. Unit 76 was dealing with sports or physical activity. Right? Physical activity. Yeah. Right. Benchu. 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 Taiso. Taiso. Oops. Tai for the body. Taiso. Taiso. So has the 3 blocks. It's like that. Yeah. Copy. It's okay. Taiso. It's a little off-centered. Alright. Let's do that again. Taiso. Track and field. Track and field is Rikujo. Rikujo. Oh, wait. Before that, there's also moving. Ugaku. Ugaku is the moving again. Ugaku. Riku. Ooh. Riku? Yeah, and Riku and Jo. As in like Jozu. Rikujo. What else we got? Judo. Yeah. Do. Oh, which one's do? Do as in like Dao. 知道 or Michi, I guess. And one. Yeah. Q. Is it 3? Gotta be 3. Got room for 3, right? Q. It's a little too slim. Q. Q is standard. Q. Q. 随意 No. I'm thinking of Chinese. 随 Oh, no, no, no. No, they're pretty. I just, 游泳 is a little different. The 游 随意 karate. Karate is Scott bare hand, sort of. Sora or kara and then te. Katakana? Gorufu. Gorufu. Ski. Ski. Alright. So events, right? Sporting events. Events, Shumoku. Shumoku. So it's like looking, right? Or something, spectating something, moving, or doing something important. So shu, moku. See, I, moku. Shumoku. Phrasing for events. Tanoshimi. Ne? Tanoshimi and dasu. Dasu. There's also kaijo. 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 Like a stadium place. Ish. Yep. Okay. Olympic. Ori. Ori. Horin. Oh boy. Not. Stop! Stop being a pet. um. Medaru. 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 Toru. 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 Umai or imai. Was it umai? Umai. Umai and jozu. Jozu. Dekiru. Whoops. Yes. Deki. Inzo. 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 In. I'm still not sure about this character here. Gin. And Do. Do. Okay. That looks good. Next, let's. Unit 77. What are we on time? 30 minutes? Unit 77. Unit 77 is kind of a vocab, right? Oh, it's potential form. To say things that we could possibly do. Although it's a bunch of scattered vocabulary, really. The last couple of units in Duolingo was pretty all over the place. Otto, and yesterday, someone mentioned my koe. Now we have koe again. Naku. Naku. All these deal with sound. Naku. No. Kikoe. Kikoeru. Koeru. Wakaru. And then now we have things about believing or like understanding, comprehension. So wakaru. Wakaru. Wait, it's not correct. Wait. I was thinking oboeru. oru. Shinjiru. Shinjiru. And you. Yeah? You. Yes. And some random practice. I remember writing these random practice. Like tobu. My tobu is so sloppy. Tobu. Oh, we got new ones. Odoru. Dance. Odoru. Odoru. Right. Odoru. Odoru. And naosu. Naosu. Another one. Naosu. Harau. And then the grammar thing. So the grammar thing for potential form was ichidan, right? Ichidan was you take the verb and rare. Rare. And for goldan for goldan was the verb stem and use e. Okay, one last unit to go. Not too bad, not too bad. It's such a different amount from yesterday to today. Okay. 78, our final unit. 78 was another grammar unit. It was to express you don't have to do something, right? You don't have to do something and also doing favors for someone. Or doing it for something or some purpose, along with some miscellaneous vocabulary. So we have mezurashi. Mezurashi. The other yasashi. This one deals with describing people. I'm more associated with describing people. So tall. Yeah, that's good enough. Yasashi. The other one's usually written in kana too, but we did write the other one. So, sugoi. Written in kana. Sugoi. Sugoi. Then Kimi. It's kind of funny. I didn't make the connection that this was you, but I was watching something. Oops, I was watching something today. Like Kimi, I'm like, oh yeah, instead of Anata. More random stuff. I didn't check the stroke order of that. I'm not sure if that's the stroke order. I've done two different stroke orders. Yesterday was different too. Aisha. Aisha. Like in dentist. There's another profession, and I didn't ever remember what it was. Pronunciation. Hatsuon. Yeah, Hatsuon. How the heck did Hatsuon work? Is there 1 dash or 2 dash? I'm gonna guess there's 1 dash each. Hatsuon. Huh? Oh wait, that's fine. And on Hatsuon. On is the on in music. Hatsuon Hitsuyo. Hitsuyo is weird in Japanese. It's like this, then this. Yes. Hitsuyo. Yo, as in yao. Hitsuyo. Like stuff, so we have another kosoado situation. So konna. 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 Right. And Anna. Now we get Sagasu. Sagasu. Three? E. Sagasu. Sagasu. Yaru. Yaru is pretty multi-purpose. Yaru. Tetsudao. Tetsuda. Ne? Tetsudao. Then we have Ageru. Ageru and Morao. Theme. Got a lot of words that are functional as well for doing favors and whatnot. So like kedo. Also, there's stuff like ga, ending with ga. Or sore. Like katakana English, Chinese pronunciation is also in the Japanese style. Biyao. Yeah, biyao. Yeah, hitsuyo. Yep. Hitsuyo and biyao. Yeah. I like this one. By coincidence, when I was learning Duolingo Chinese and Japanese, where I started Chinese, it overlapped with Japanese. So Duolingo starts introducing kanji like really, really far in, like 200 days in, when they focus on kanji, and it starts over by replacing all the kana with kanji. And in Chinese, it ran side by side. So I started Chinese at the same time, and it runs parallel. And lots of these things happen quite a lot. Especially Hitsuyo is definitely one where I didn't really need to know. The Chinese came first, so I didn't need to know what Hitsuyo was, like what it meant before the read because of Yao. Yeah, so much good stuff. Like Yisheng is a little bit different. You know, you replace Sheng here, but Yi is still here. Fei, right? Fei is here. Tobu. Fei. I didn't get anything that looks like Sagasu yet. Sagasu. This is the beginning of music or sound. Sound and music are the same. I don't I guess Ying. Plenty of others. I think the weirdest one is probably Tanoshimi. Tano is one of the fun interactions with Chinese, simplified and traditional. Traditional is a little bit more complicated than this. Japanese is simplified, and then the simplified is unrelated to both the traditional and the Japanese. It's one of the classic examples. Ano. I wonder if Kongsho turns to be translate to karate. Karate. Because Kong, that's still air. Kong and then Shou is still hand. Right? Kong Shou. Shui Yong. Shui Yong kind of makes sense, honestly. But they use Yo Yong to like to move the water, so Yo Yong. As opposed to Sui Ye or Shui Yong. Okay, so let's see. We have what was it? Or, right? Sore tomo. Sore tomo. That's also, oh yeah, right, Hanja as well. You'll try to learn Korean soon? Ah man, so many people are learning Korean too. Through like Hanja is such a great way to bridge Korean as well. I'm debating. I'm debating. Someone I know really likes Korean. Actually, a couple people really know like Korean, and learning using Hanja to get into Korean is kind of a nice way to get in there. Maybe in a year or two. I see. Yeah, no hurry. No hurry. Sore. Sore tomo. Sore tomo. Sore tomo. Or. Sore tomo. And then we have a bunch of Y's, right? Or because, or therefore. So. それで、だから、だから、だ。Hangul makes you crazy. I know, right? You know what? You know, my impersonation of writing Korean when it comes to Hangul, Hangul is like, ne, ye, e, e. Okay, I'm pretending to write. I'm pretending to write Korean. You just gotta throw in a bunch of circles and lines that are not connected to each other. You know? There, I'm writing Korean. I'm joking. I don't know any Korean, but you just gotta throw in a bunch of circles and some lines that are not connected to each other. It looks cool though. Someone said here's what someone said. You remember the Pokemon, the unknown Pokemon? That's what someone said. The system is nice. Yeah, the system is really nice and logical. It's actually one of the newer languages too, right? Because what's his name? The one of the people who led Korea um wanted to create a system, right? It's one of the more modern systems. The Hangul is one of like one of the like one of the youngest like writing systems, like the ones that are more macro, like well known. But it someone said it basically reminds you of the Pokemon, you know, the unknown Pokemon that kind of like looks like this or something, right? With like an eyeball, right? And then maybe like we should give it a eyebrow. that's 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 what that looks like. It looks cool. It's so recognizable. Like Korean is so recognizable. Recently I watched Squid Game. I watched season 2 of Squid Game. So I was reintroduced to a lot of Korean. Squid Game season 2. Okay. Let's see. We have Dakara. Dakara. Eh? I think that's it, right? Yeah. Sorede and Dakara. Dakara. What else we got? We have a grammar. So the grammar is no, you're using for something. So no, and then tame, 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 yeah, tame no, right? Tame no, and then you could do like add a verb. You could add a verb in like a te form verb. And then ni, so it can be doing something in that case. It was a little complicated, but this unit was pretty cool. To be able to like do something for someone in some way. It's probably the more complicated things that I've come across recently. It feels less of a simple sentence, which is kind of nice. The unit was pretty cool. We're finally getting to some like grammar like more complicated sentences again. And then they used like 3 verbs to demonstrate you don't need to do something. You don't have to do something. Like yomu yomu kaku and iku. Iku, so they basically took the verb stem, swapped it to a column, plus nai naku, nakutemo and nakutemo ii. So you don't have to do something. Like you don't have to go, you don't have to write, you don't have to read, you don't have to study every day. I'm kidding. Study every day. Or else I'm gonna find you. I'm gonna make you study every day. Okay. So that's it. That's all of the material. So we covered all the material. And now we get to talk about random stuff. So we'll write it down here. So let's go back. What was my topic that I said I was gonna... I think I'm gonna adjust it a little. So day 3, we did that. We're gonna describe constructs. Oh, right. I should describe constructs before I answer frequently asked questions. Okay, so the current method I'm doing, right? So we have to go over our Duolingo routine, our SRS for our Duolingo, in order for this to work. I get this question quite a bit when I was only doing Duolingo, and now I'm doing Wanikani and Hanzi Hero, so it doesn't come up as often. So let's go over. So what do I do on Duolingo? Which I'm gonna start again soon. So every day in day 1, we do 1 lesson set, right? We call them lesson sets. 1 lesson set. And for the Japanese Duolingo, Duolingo course, it can range from as low as 4 lessons to 7 lessons on the high end. So these lessons, this first lesson set would be exposure. So this is the lesson that they're going to introduce new things. So we try to listen, and we do, we listen and read, basically. Listen and read. Input. Right? Input. It's largely input. And at the end of the day, so after we complete this lesson, then we get a completion bonus, and then we do kanji. We go to the kanji section. And we do a 15-minute period of as much kanji as we can. And each lesson set will introduce kanji, and we go to the kanji section and do 15 minutes. That's a timer. There's a built-in timer for Duolingo because of like 2x XP bonus starts at the end of a lesson. So that's how I pseudo time how long I spend with kanji section. And then once we do the kanji section, I use this kanji section to create a construct. A construct. That is to organize the things like this. So the reason why I wrote it this way is because it's easier to remember, right? Like this flows really well. Like you have a player who does physical exercise and moves around, right? Moves around. And examples of that would be track and field, judo, yaku, table tennis, swimming, right? Swimming, karate, golf, skiing. And then these things can take place as events, right? Shumoku. And you can look forward to them, tanoshimi, or dasu can be also used to participate in a way. And then these events can take place in a stadium. So that's why I place kaijo here. And then one of the events could be Olympics, right? The Olympics, sorry, Olympiku. And then in the Olympics, you can earn medals, as in medals for winning. So you can win toru. And toru, if you win, you are good. These are kind of 2 different ways of saying something is good. Although umai is often for like taste most of the time when I see it. And then jozu, right? And then metals can be made of, so dekiru, and this is kinzo, which is metal. Then there's 3 different types of metal. We have kin, and do. So that's kind of my construct. So these are examples of constructs. And constructs are typically, you take whatever the kanji section has and whatever I could remember in my head as much as I can. Basically during this section, I make notes try to remember as many things as I can, and I make a construct. And the constructs are related by 4 different things. 1, they are related by meaning, which is the top level. 2, they could be related by sound. 3, they can be related by its characters. So the kanji, I can associate them by kanji. Meaning is usually category. And then also story. So if it builds a story, I'll build a story. And then sound, if they sound the same. So these are reads. When things sound the same, I can group them by that. And then characters, if they look the same but can sound different. And then this is how I could create the construct. So it can be any combination of this. I do various things. Like this would be an example. Like for instance, this is clustering. So all 3 of these are adjectives. All these are predicates. They're all verbs. These are all situational things that deals with sentence construction. So like asking why, or because of this, or therefore that, or, and then I write a small example with a grammar on conjugation or something like that. And then these are random, so I can't put them anywhere. So I would place them in a random miscellaneous category when it's a small section. And then, you know, there are ones that flow really well, like this one. And this one, it's clustered in a way. These are all city names. And then I decide to attach the vocabulary to a city. Like Shibuya. Shibuya has a intersection that is very famous, the Shibuya crossing. So that's why I use Kosaten. I linked Kosaten with Shibuya. And usually Shibuya and Harajuku and stuff is like Tokyo, right? Area. So this is where it's a big city. And then the big city is also a capital. So Shuto and Taitoshi, right? And then Akihabara, Meito, and Cosplay is a very like a foreigner's perspective on what happens in Akihabara, right? And then Ginza is what I typically associate with the Sarariman. It's a business district. So and then work. So hataraku. So it goes on and on. And then here's an example of me linking between words and characters that look the same or sound the same, like a rendaku, right? So Hiroshima, there's hiro in hiroba. Hiroba is still a place, and then right, hiroba, and then another place, basho. Basho then has residences, jumim, right? And then what do jumims do? Atsumari, to gather, a gathering, or atsumaru, to gather up. And when you gather up, it can get crowded. So komu. Komu, and when you count people in there, there's kazu. And when you count the number of people, you have jinko, the population. And then population can either increase or decrease, right? This is what Duolingo actually does. Duolingo does this, but they don't literally connect the things. So it's not entirely me. I'm not like connecting all of these things from scratch. Duolingo tries to make each lesson connectable. And sometimes it can be 2 separate things, but you can group them together. So like one time there's a unit where they talk about school and then suddenly talk about sports. But you can group the sports and school together. And that's kind of what you're supposed to be thinking, in my opinion. When you use Duolingo, you have to connect the dots. You have to create an association on your own. If they stay separate, it's not enough, right? Oftentimes, the reason why constructs are done for me is to offer more context. And this context is related to being creative. You have to be creative enough to form the context. So it takes effort. When you be creative, it has to take effort. It takes extra time. So you might be, some people might say like, "Oh, I don't want to do that." And it's like, "That's fine. Go to a different tool. Read a book, Go to a tool that offers you the story." But I think the efficacy, how useful Duolingo has to be is you have to create this. I'm going to be taking a break tomorrow, but then the following day I'm going to be reviewing the Duolingo Chinese course, the end of the Duolingo Chinese course, the last 100 days, and all my constructs are built in a story format. On the Chinese course, you have to do the same. Actually, most of the Chinese course connects like this, where you have to imagine saying these things and then connecting them like, oh, I would say this here, and then you have to imagine yourself being in like a station, a train station. You would use this, then that, and eventually the idea is when you combine with other sources, you'll be able to fill in the gaps, right? That's the idea anyways. I think in no way does Duolingo say you should do that. Personally, I did this so that I don't forget stuff. It's easier to remember for me personally, maybe not everyone else. It's easier for me to sort these things out like this. So then I can write the characters. I can know the reads. It takes extra time though. It slows me down because I think Duolingo goes too fast. I think Duolingo does not explain a lot of things, which most people agree. However, they don't explain a lot of things. That doesn't mean it's not going really, really fast. A lot of comments that I get, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is tons of people believe that Duolingo is very repetitive, right? It's repetitive because it's very effective. It's not effective in your memory, but it's effective in reminding you what you need to remember. And the problem with that is it's doing all the work. Like the word bank is too small, right? So you can't get it wrong, but you still see all the words. The problem is you know the right answer all the time. It takes very low effort to know the right answer, which means that you don't try, like in my opinion, that means there's not much work you're doing. So the answer, the long story short, is I do these constructs at the end and it takes a really long time. Like day one, most of my time is this portion. It's at the end of the day and I try as hard as possible, and this is all written. We do this in writing, right? So this is my time to write. I create these constructs. And that is the thing I'm demonstrating here. Then we go to day 2, right? Then it's the following day. Day 2. And the first thing I do is I recall. And I recall from memory what this construct is. So I write on the screen at the beginning of day 2 session. I write out exactly what I planned the previous day. And that is my tool to remember what was in that unit. Not every single detail about it. Not all the words that recur all the time. Like if it says, I like to run, right? I like to run. I liked running. I want to run. I should run. If they are doing all of those things, all I'm writing is run and the 4 ways to conjugate, right? I remind myself, okay, so they basically conjugated run like a billion times. So I write iku, and then remind myself, ikimashou, right? Ikimashou, ikimasen, whatever else I said, ikimasen deshita, right? You're trying to group it up. So that's kind of what I do, as opposed to trying to remember every single word. Like all the sentence stuff, they'll come up much, much more frequently. So you'll in my opinion, you'll get that stuff over time. And that's the repetition. So we recall the construct. It's at the beginning of every single stream. There's going to be a construct. So we recall the construct. And then in day 2, what Duolingo does is it's review. So we do 1 lesson set. And this still is the same. It's the same amount. So it's going to be 4 to 7 lessons. If it was 4 up there, it's 4 down here. And this is a review. So what happens is there's no new things. There are no new things. It's all the stuff you learned in a previous day. Now, because my construct, I might have missed something. Because I'm trying my best to remember as best as I can. Sometimes I break out a notepad and write. So now this is where I break out a notepad again, and I write down all the things that I missed in my construct. So I break out a notepad, which is what I started doing recently. So I break out a notepad on my computer, right? My notepad, and I write down the things that I missed. Or any additional things I want to write, things that I miss. But generally, I'm focusing on things that I missed. And at the end of the day, once again, once I finish this lesson, right? Oh, and we'll talk about the new feature. Actually, we can talk about a new feature here. So once we finish this lesson, we write down everything that we missed and also do the story. So the story is new from in the last 100 days. It's actually new in the last 20 days. So there are 10 stories and we're on story, so we did 3 of the stories. And there's not much to write about. It's nice. I think it's nice to have stories. However, the Japanese course is not that well. It's not like the #1. It's not a competing language, so there's not as much development on the Japanese story. But I like that there's extra stuff, right? The story are interesting. Something to note, they're written entirely in kana. So like a mix, it's actually mostly hiragana, actually. Almost 90% of it is in hiragana. So what I do for the story is, it's a separate thing. I read the story, and I convert everything to kanji. So I read the story, they talk, and it's a kana, right? It's in kana. So I remind myself, and I use literally on stream, I translate, quote unquote, I rewrite it in kanji. So it was a perfect opportunity. I hear the kana, right? They're speaking, and I kind of understand maybe what they're doing here. And I use that as an opportunity. I think the goal they were trying to do is you're supposed to listen. And the kana can be there to offer you like what they could possibly say. But what I treat it as is, if I'm having a conversation with someone, right? I'm thinking about what it sounds like. So a lot of times I have my eyes closed. Or I'm not paying attention to the screen. So basically I'm largely listening only. And when I listen to it, I'm trying to imagine like, what are the characters? What are they looking like? Then I read the kana and then I convert it into kanji. That's what I do on those. And those stories are cute. The one thing that I would say, obviously I'm a little I like consuming content. They're short. They're quite short. Maybe we'll see how they go, but we've only done 3, and visibly there were 10. So I don't know if there's more on the next section. I'm in section 3. I can't see into section 4 yet. So and section 4 has way more lessons than 3, and 3 is taking me over half a year. So, or maybe like 5 months. So we'll see if they like get bigger or whatnot. But I think the idea, at least in my opinion, they chose to use kana has an interesting, it might not be this case, but my thought is, if it's written in all in kana, and people complain about it all the time, Like, why does Duolingo spend the first 3 sections in kana and non-kanji? And I'm like, well, if you know the kanji, that's great. If you're learning Japanese and you're relying on kana, that's okay. But lots of people, when you're learning, right, kana, everyone's gonna say like, oh yeah, but you can't read kanji yet. Like, you should learn how to read kanji. And it's like, yeah, I understand. So Duolingo takes its time, like takes a really long time. You have to get to section 3, unit 37 before they start actively introducing kanji. And kanji is almost as fast, if not faster, than Wanikani's default. So it spikes from anywhere from 15 to 20 kanji every 3 days. For me, every 3 days. For a normal Duolingo user, you know, those hyper study people, they're probably absorbing 25 to 30 kanji a day. And I'm like, yeah, there's no way. Like, I'm doing all of this just to remember like 25 kanji. So the pace changed a lot, and this was part of the last 100 days when the pace started changing. And then the story uses kana, so it's a great way to practice my kanji. Sometimes I actually play, I watch people play older Japanese games, and I try to think of the kanji that comes up in their reading. Because older Japanese games, like Final Fantasy games and whatnot, they're actually, a lot of them are written almost entirely in kana, right? In kana. So if it's not provided for you, for me, I see an opportunity to practice. People complain about this because they want to see it in its natural state. And I get that, right? I get that. If it doesn't, you can use it as practice. And that's story. That's about it about story. I really like it though. It's so the story stuff and all the advanced features are more developed for Spanish, right? Spanish and English being, and probably maybe French too, as their major languages. So I look forward to when I start Spanish to see how quickly I get these features, or like you hit these features. But for now, Japanese has stories, and Chinese don't even have stories, the Chinese course. And the Chinese course is not that popular. Although here's a funny thing, which I was going to talk about next time for Chinese. Chinese had an uptrend recently, largely due to some things that happened. So we'll talk about that when we talk about Chinese. But anyways, so I write the things that I miss, keeping stories aside, right? That stories is the new feature. For Notepad, I write down whatever is missing, and then at the end of the day, or once I complete the set and the story, right? This will then have another 15 minutes of kanji. 15 minutes of kanji, because that's self-timered. 15 minutes of kanji, and I try to complete as much as I can. Usually I don't get to the end for the kanji section, and the kanji section is usually trying to get to the end of the writing, because the writing, I want to touch upon the stroke order at least once for every character, and it takes a really long time. There's so many exercises, and the kanji section is one of my favorite sections in Duolingo because it tries to trick you by making it deliberately more confusing, right? The kanji section, the nice thing about the kanji section is that they try to trick you by putting things that mean similar things, sound similar, and look similar. And that's where I decided to also group the constructs. So Wanikani and Hanzahiro, when they try to group things by sound and look, a lot of times, that's in my wheelhouse now. Like Duolingo, that's the way Duolingo can get people. It's meaning, sound, and look. They either sound the same, they look very similar, or they mean something very similar. That's usually the norm for these things now. I usually try to like organize them in some way. So it's already done that for me, basically. So then after this, I take whatever I do to add it to the construct. So whatever I missed that I wrote down, I add it to the construct. Right? And now I have a new construct. So then we go to day 3. Day 3 is slightly different. So day 3, we start by recalling our new construct. So our updated construct. Our updated construct. And now on day 3, there's something called a personalized practice. Personalized practice, which usually goes back. This is the only form of SRS, quote unquote, or like the SRS that people are more used to at the later end. Basically, it goes back to like the last 10 units. As far as the last 10 units. So it's a few exercises, and these are generally 3. It's half, usually half rounded down of the lesson sets. And it's usually 3. So like if there were 6, there's 3 personalized practice. I think it's in Japanese, it might actually always be 3. We'll place this. It's usually 3 on average. So that gives you a little bit of personalized practice. And then there are, oh no, never mind. I'm kidding. This is always 3. It's always 3 lessons. I'm thinking about something else. These are 3 lessons. The personalized practice set. Then there's a review set, another review set, and it's half of the first set or second set, whichever. So if day 1 had like 3, or no, if day 1 had 6, then the last set has 3. So it's a shorter. And then there's a trophy, which is the final review of the unit. And during this, I focus on one last thing. Since now I should have farmed everything that I need to know, now I think about anything that I want to add to the construct. So now it's not about hunting for new things, or it's not about new things or things I missed. Mainly, it's also about anything I want to add in addition with previous knowledge. So like, for example, sometimes when we're talking about food, right? When we talk about food, I know a lot of foods, right? I know a lot of foods. The unit might only talk about like 1 to 4 things. And I'm like, let's add another 5 to practice. So this is what day 3 is. I'm reviewing, but now I'm also actively adding my previous knowledge to get a little bit of practice in. And that's how come the constructs can get longer than they are. It helps me flex and add anything back. So not only am I still seeing if there's anything new or things that I missed, I'm adding to previous things. And then we add that construct. So then we have the finalized construct. Finalized construct. Right? And also now, depending on time, I try to finish the kanji section. Which doesn't ever happen. Like consistently, it's too long. It's like there's so much practice. There's a lot of practice. They really want to make sure you know the stuff. So usually I resort to I settle on ending when I practice writing each of the new characters. So each of the new kanji, as long as I wrote it once to check writing, to check stroke order, I'm gone. Like, I'm moving on to the next one. So that's what I'm doing every single day now. This is what I'm doing every single day. And the stuff that I've written here, all these are every single construct that I've created for every unit. And it's not really necessarily like I came up from scratch, because Duolingo deliberately, I'm trying to force myself in a good way to figure out why did they include all these words the way they did, because that way I pay more attention. I'm paying attention to, okay, I can see why they decide to pick all of these, right? Like, this is the past tense casual past tense, and they picked very specific ones, like, oh, okay, so that's a aru, that's a that's a ru, that's a like mu, bu. Like, they're trying to pick specific words to give you conjugations for them. They're not telling you what the conjugation is, they're showing you what the conjugation is. And you kind of group them together. So that's what I'm doing now. And that covers our first point, which is describe the construct, right? And the current method that I'm using, right? There is one last thing that I need to mention. Now that 3 days are over, we move on to the next unit, right? So we move on to day 4. And in day 4, this is the new unit. You only stick to a unit after 3 days. And the new unit, you repeat. You repeat day 1 through 3. Meanwhile, in day 4, I still write the construct of the previous unit. So whatever I came up with over here, I continue to write it. I continue to write it for 3 more days. So day 4 through day 6, I continue to recall it. So that's 6 straight days. 6 straight days of recalling. And on top of that, these ones get added. So then I'm doing 2 constructs. I'm juggling 2 constructs every single day. That's what I did before. Like, every single day, I juggle 2 constructs. And then after the 6th day, right? After the 6th day, I drop one and rotate out. So like, if I do construct 1, right? And then construct 2, when construct 3 rolls around, I drop construct 1, and it keeps continuing that way. So that's what I did for the first 3, for whenever I started, which is around like day 200, something like that. So the last 100 days, basically, that's what I've been doing. It's longer than that. It's like 150 days or something like that. So I've been rotating like this for a while. Now this is where we get into the current thing that I'm testing. So the question is, once I drop this, how long do I wait? Right? Because SRS, right? How long do I wait before going back through this? Well, when I'm working on construct 2, Duolingo lessons typically include the lesson from here. Like, they sprinkle it in, right? They sprinkle it in, and they continue to do that for usually 3 lessons down, like 3 units down. So you still get some reminder. So I let that happen. Just let it happen because I'm not going to actively review them, right? And I tested 25 days. So from the day of that construct, 25 days, then I would do something like this. Then I would go and do my tentative review, my tentative takes, which is what I'm doing right this moment. And I used to do 25 days. Then I was like, okay, 25 days is pretty fine. Everything is retained. It almost feels like I did it yesterday. So then I tested 50 days. It was okay. It was like 90% plus. 90% plus. So it was pretty good. And this is the first time I've waited 100 days. And we're gonna talk about it a little bit. I think it's gonna be like 80%. Like I've dropped down to 80%. And this is where I draw the line because I don't want to go any lower than this. 100 days was really tough. So when I was reviewing and preparing for this, the amount of time to prep. So the prep time went up. And also obviously the accuracy went down. So we're going to talk about this part. This is the segue to what I want to go over today. So let's hop on over. So the big question now is, how long do I wait? And for me, I generally draw metrics, things to help guide me for how long do I wait. So what do I measure? Retention. And it's based on the honor system. So it's not like I have a teacher or anything that produces these criteria for me. I used to teach, and also I used to go to formal education. So I got a fairly good many years of experience in knowing how to measure myself. So that's kind of what we're relying on here. So my metrics, retention. The lowest I will decide to go is 80%. And this is because it's arbitrary, but it's the 80-20 rule. I just use the 80-20 rule. It may or may not be optimal. I just choose 80-20 because the 80-20 rule. So lowest is 80%, right? So if I go back and I look at my YouTube videos, right? All the YouTube videos have the construct in the beginning of each day. So I look back at the constructs of each video and I see how much I retain. If it gets the lowest is 80%. So I want it above 80% at all time. So generally I aim for 90%. Right? 90%. And the last time I checked, 90%, I had more than 90% at 50 days extension. So it's greater than 90%. I break up a canvas like this and I write, right? I do it on stream. I write and see how many things I forget. So right now, from how long I wait, to give you a long story short, it's definitely less than 100 days. And it's probably greater than 50 days. And usually I'm more of a safe person, so I think we're gonna go back to 50 days and try it out again. I've only done 50 days like twice, right? And these things take a very long time. They disrupt, it takes a while to prep them, right? So I wanted to do a longer period to see if I can do something less frequently. So 50 days, we're going back to 50 days. What happened was when I was prepping, I've noticed that it's very uncomfortable when I drop and I keep using reference material, right? So whenever I'm looking, I'm like, I don't know this. So I pull up a dictionary. And I'm like, I'm not sure about this part. Then I pull up a grammar source, right? And when I increasingly do that and it drops below 80%, it feels not so great. It feels like this would be the time I would be practicing. So oftentimes I try to aim for 90%. So we're going back to 50, just to be safe. Largely because that's where I cut out. So there's also another difference. I spent close to 2 weeks actually on and off practicing on my own. So I had to prep a lot of material. Like I need to make sure I got all the constructs written. And of course, there are still errors, right? Like I'm human. So there's a chance when I was remembering the construct, it's not correct, right? So there are errors already in the stuff. So it's on top of this. That's kind of where when someone says, oh, hey, you've written this incorrect, you've written that incorrect. The idea is I need to see that I'm writing things incorrect, and I review these things. These are intentionally set in a way that I go out of my way to correct these. And if I correct these things, then it becomes more solid. Now, there are still errors that people can catch. And I'm obviously very grateful because I'm only human. Now, the thing is, when you speak and when you read, these errors do not make something unintelligible. So the one thing, the basic minimum, the baseline minimum, not baseline, bottom line, the bottom line is that a lot of the errors that I correct over time is to make sure it's intelligible. So if I make intelligible mistakes, as in it still makes sense even though my error was here, like people can largely figure it out and they were able to correct me, then those things are not as high priority, right? I keep moving. These things will become normalized and practiced with due diligence, and they'll iron out. So these are the pedantic, that I say a lot of times, pedantic errors. So like, for example, I'll be writing something and I'll be practicing something, and then of the 100 times I write something, I made an error. I like added an extra stroke somewhere. Right? That's 1 out of 100. The odds of that even making it unintelligible is not greater than you think. Like we keep talking about Japanese and Chinese, right? They're context dependent. Well, the context is how often and how consistently I've written that character and understand it, right? That would be a context. And then if I make that error, the context is surrounded by all the stories and sentences and things that are happening. When you talk to someone, when you make an error in speech, it is still context dependent. So those are still not unintelligible mistakes. They are intelligible mistakes, which that's the stuff that I trust that with time I can compensate for those things in an intuitive way. Most of the things that don't happen right now, because I maintain 80 to 90%, and you know, people who like comprehensible input, right, would keep some sort of arbitrary level of comprehension, if not create that comprehension. And that's how I'm doing it with Duolingo. So it takes 2 weeks to practice that though. for this time around, and it was on and off. I was really tired. Like, my energy is so spent every day preparing for these 3 days, and I still got 3 more days to go for Duolingo Chinese. So I'm at my limit, and I know it, which is great because now I know how far I can go, right? How far I can go. So now I'm scaling back. We're going back to 50 days, and 50 days required like 4 days. We're gonna say approximately 1 week of prep. And now I only have Duolingo Japanese left. So I'm not prepping for Chinese anymore. So 1 week is very manageable. So in the future, when I'm doing 50 days, it's going back to 1 week of practice. And I might be able to stream it. I don't know. My voice is the rate limiting step, right? If my voice goes out, I stop streaming. I don't want to push myself in the sense of sacrificing my voice, right? So yeah, there you have it. How long do I wait? I wait approximately no more, like I'm gonna wait comfortably around 50 days. So my process right now, I haven't changed it at all. Maybe I'll change it in the future to make it even more salient. But what I've done that works well for me is it takes me 3 days. So let's do the tally, right? Let's do the tally. Excuse me. It takes me 3 days to complete 1 unit. 1 unit in Duolingo, because people are curious about that a lot of times. Like, how long do you spend? 3 days. It takes me 6 days. 6 day consecutive 6 days to practice and create. Not necessarily 6 total days to create, but to create a construct, right? To create a construct, and then 6 days to practice. And with whatever Duolingo does, with whatever Duolingo's practice thing that they have going on, I can comfortably retain 90% of the content in across a 50-day. It's actually less than 50 days because I have to do the first 6 days. So we're gonna say approximately 50 days of non-active, non-focused practice. So I don't go out of my way to practice these things. Like my constructs, I no longer practice my constructs. That doesn't mean that on my free time, I don't think about these things. I do. So to make a extra thing, we have to remember that when I am not on Duolingo, when I am not on Duolingo, which we introduce a new thing now, I could be on Wanikani, right? Plus a lot of everything else. I watch anime, watch vlogs, right? Anything that gets me engaged with Japanese. Now, it's even more complicated than that. I also now do Hanzahiro, right? Hanzahiro, and I was doing Duolingo Chinese, which I will do or summarize. Long story short, I will continue to review off and on Duolingo Chinese, whatever's in Duolingo Chinese. And this is related because whenever I think of Hanzi, I think of kanji. They're one and the same. Like, we're not separating them. Like, a frequently question, like, they're not different. They're not treated differently. when I think of English, I think of if I can express it in Japanese or Chinese. If I can't, I move along. So when it comes to hybrid language, at least in my opinion, hybrid language, the more I can think about all of the above, about all of the above, all of the above, I will try that all the time. So no, I don't sit here and say, okay, I'm gonna take a break now, so I'm gonna switch over to English mode and say I'm gonna spend the rest of my day only thinking about English. No, I consume content and I think, I wonder how you say that in Japanese. I could say this in English. What would that translate to Japanese? Oh wait, but I know a little thing about Chinese. It goes back and forth all the time. Like, I ask myself, how do I say things in Fujianese all the time? Then I go to ask my father. These are practicing stuff. Even though, right? For example, I don't pick up a dictionary. I don't like pick up a dictionary and like change all my habits. I practice as many things as I know. So all the average stuff, right? Hajimemashite, right? Arigatou gozaimasu, right? Ohayo, konbanwa, right? That stuff, it's because I actually say that in English and Chinese too, right? 很高兴认识你, right? 你好, right? 你说中文吗? Right? 你说中文吗? Right? 我也说中文. 我也会说中文. Right? These things I say normally, like, oh yeah, I can't really speak Chinese, or like, so I'm constantly practicing many times over all the time. But when I'm not learning, I'm not carrying a dictionary with me. I'm not like using a plugin. Like, for example, when I watch anime and stuff, I don't have Pleco or what is it, Boom Pro active. The idea is I just practice whatever I know already. It's me time. When you practice, quote unquote, like reviewing, you are focusing on all the things you know. You're trying to focus on juggling and solidifying all the things you know. The last thing, in my opinion, that you want is to keep on introducing new things. So this is one of my hot takes. Let's write it in a different color. My hot take here is, when you choose to learn something, when I choose to learn something, I'm near 100%. I think differently. My mindset is different. I have a plan, right? I have a plan. I have an intention. It's active. Now, after I do this, I'm tired, right? Quote unquote, tired. It's a position where I no longer want to learn, like take more information in, like no longer take more information, right? And obviously this will vary depending on whoever you are, whatever you are. My workload is pretty high. I've already talked about in Wanikani, my Wanikani does not exceed my workload, because Wanikani also has practice. Practice is review. So unless their lessons, quote unquote, unless their lessons exceed, get bigger than my learning capacity, then I have no problems. So when I stop streaming, ideally, this is what I typically do now. I only stream as much of my learning lessons as I can. Everything else involves practicing. And practicing is, in my opinion, the lowest effort possible, because you should know these things. These are the things you should know, right? And emphasis on should. So when your energy is low, you already spent all day learning, right? You already spent all day learning. The last thing you can do to squeeze out a little bit more effort is you're gonna practice, but it's the lowest possible effort. So you're not cramming more things into your head. Why is that important to me? Because if you're cramming all the time, if you're cramming, so your practice bleeds into your immersion, or your learning, if you're cramming, like you're learning more, right? Learning more bleeds into your lifestyle. For example, your anime, right? What will that do? Like psychologically, this is the hot take. So psychologically, what will that do to you? You will begin, in my opinion, you will begin to associate anime with learning, like manga with learning. So it's going to feel like you're always studying, which I don't agree with that word, studying. It's more like you're always learning Japanese or Chinese or what have you, right? But you're not practicing. You don't get a chance to practice anything because you're so focused on learning that you don't get any sufficient practice in, right? Imagine you watch an anime, right? And you stop at every single word that you don't know. So you break out your dictionary and you're gonna read it. And you're like, oh, okay, I finally got it. Now I'm just tired. I don't want to read the rest of the anime. Like, I don't want to read the rest of the manga. Like, oh, this is so exhausting. I barely got a chance to watch my favorite anime or my manga or enjoy it because you're so focused on learning constantly. You're not focused on balancing practice and learning, which both of them is part of studying. Studying is the balance between learning and practicing. So for me, I separate those two. I learn when I'm ready to learn. I'm most energy, most wired. And then when I go to relax, I'm focusing on practicing. What does that look like when you're consuming anime and manga? I write down things I want to know. And also things I don't know. And I move on. That's it. I move on. And then focus on things I already know. Because they're no different. Focus on things I already know. They're no different than what you already have. So yes, I do watch anime and manga with English subtitles. I also watch them with Japanese subtitles. I watch English anime dubbed in English with Japanese subtitles. The idea is that I'm practicing with things I know. I know English, right? I mean, I could even turn it to Chinese. I could watch the Chinese dub of an anime that gives me Japanese subtitles. That could be a thing in the future. The idea is every time I figure out, oh, I don't know this. Oh, this comes up so often. I write it down or I make it a mental note or I don't do it at all. I tell myself, oh yeah, this is interesting, but it's not the time. It's not now. I do not want to drop everything in order to learn more when I don't want to learn more, right? If you're like me and you're spending the whole day already learning, the last thing you want to do is then do anything you want to have fun with, like all the things you want to have fun, right? you're relaxing, and suddenly you're like, you turned it into a learning lesson. Like, I say a lot of things is about learning, and I talk about that because when I'm streaming, I'm learning. And then I emphasize that when I stop learning, which is whenever I'm off stream, I'm eating, I'm sleeping, I'm going out to enjoy nature, I'm going out on a run. These are things I know how to do really, really well. So I'm only practicing them. I'm maintaining them. And while I'm going out, I'm practicing all my Japanese, Chinese, and linking it with Fujianese and English. It's low effort. You're trying to lower the exhaustion, right? You're minimizing effort. When you're speaking and writing things you know, right? Things you know. Eventually it has to be effortless. Get used to it. Because don't get getting hung up on everything you don't know or want to know is gonna bog down the rest of your quality of life. So psychologically, this would then cause you to dislike, right? Dislike learning. So, when you went around and practiced, when you are supposed to be practicing, in my opinion, this is my opinion, when you're practicing and you turned into a learning lesson, it's going to feel like you never stopped. You never stop learning. And what happens to a lot of people is it creates burnout. You're gonna burn out. Well, a good example in my life is science. Science, right? Science. I loved my job. I really did. I loved my job. And I never stopped concerning myself with my job. I took it home. I took it on vacation. I lived and breathed this stuff, and I burned out immediately. Well, not really immediately, but as immediate as one could get in terms of scope of a career. People have careers for 30 to 40 years, and I didn't have a career for 30 or 40 years. I wasn't a scientist until maybe at most charitably for 10 years, right? Conservatively for 10 years because I burned out. And this type of compartmentalization is something worth considering. I hear so much more when someone says, oh yeah, watching you encourages me. Like yesterday, literally someone said, watching you doing this stuff for 6 hours encouraged me to do my Anki deck. I don't need to be encouraged to learn. I don't need fuel or motivation. All the things that I do when I'm doing for fun, when I'm practicing and I'm living out the rest of my day and eating and thinking about Japanese food I want to try and stuff, those are low effort. It's replenishing. It makes me want to learn more, right? There's a difference when you're chronically focused on learning. If you turn everything you have to learning Japanese and Chinese, evaluate. It can be for someone. It can be for people who are very used. I'm not saying there aren't people out there that isn't like me. I'm not like everyone else as well. So you have to gauge when you're going into a learning session. Are you looking forward to it? Does it feel like you're doing something new, right? When you're learning, you're looking forward to learning something new. However, if the thing you're telling yourself is, oh, I already learned a lot of new things. I guess I still have to go through my Anki deck, right? To me, that's a great sign that you are, in my opinion, one is not making enough time to practice and reap the rewards of all your learning. Now, it's kind of tough because there are people who aren't disciplined enough, right? They could be relaxing and keep excusing themselves for things. That's fair. That's a fair trade-off. I'm specifically talking about like my type of work ethic right here. I have come to terms that there are times when your focus is to practice. You practice what you already know. You learn new things, because if you keep learning all the time, I mean, I'm that guy who tells you like, oh, you can turn everything into a learning lesson within given reason. um I literally am not I'm, for full transparency, I don't sit here and say my whole day is about learning. How will I eat? How will I sleep? If I'm constantly learning about sleeping and eating, then I don't practice anything to get better at it, right? To get more consistent. When you're practicing, you're doing consistency, not novelty. So, what does this look like when it comes to, it's like, oh, MAKU, like, how do you know these people are gonna burn out or something when they start talking about things like progress? Hyper focus on progress. So like, oh, I got to do this much every single day, every single day, even if it costs me my lifestyle. Or something like, I decided how to allocate all my time to maximum efficiency, right? Then you're thinking, oh, I guess this person's planning everything around quote unquote learning. A common comment would be, I don't need to practice. I don't need to practice what I already know. You might be thinking, well, that's weird. Like, if you already know it, why would you want to practice it? It's like, because to know something, when you know something, you learned it. When you learn something, it takes a lot of effort, right? It takes a lot of effort to do this. So why would you practice something and spend even more effort, right? Why would you spend more effort after you spent so much effort learning? Well, the capacity is you're practicing. And there are a lot of potential balance for this. When you're too tired to learn, which people who consider learning and practicing the same thing, then if you learn something, then you already practice enough. For example, someone who don't think about fundamentals, right? How do you like to write something? How do you develop encouraging yourself to write all the time, like this, like what I'm doing here? How do you encourage yourself to do that? Well, if you think it's the same as learning, then you don't. You're psychologically, you will likely not normalize motivation to do something again, to practice until it's consistent. So cue the person who wants to correct me after I make one mistake, right? How does that relate to one mistake? I made one mistake. How many times do you think I'm going to write that character? It's going to be at least hundreds of thousands of times before my lifetime is over, right? But if you're talking to someone who thinks effort is equated to learning without practice, then they would want to correct themselves or other people, knowing that they probably will let it linger and not practice, right? If you want to get it right on the first shot all the time, that is a consequence, in my opinion, or chicken or the egg question, where when you learn something, you got to learn it right. There's no chance that you're going to go over it again so consistently that you can correct the mistake, right? You want to get it right, efficient the first time, right the second time, and then that should be sufficient. You move on. Well, I'm obviously not talking to those type of people then. Here, for me, Practice makes consistent. It doesn't make perfect. It can get, you can work towards perfect, but perfect is an idealization. Practice makes consistent, and that consistency doesn't necessarily have to be completely accurate. It is consistent enough to be satisfactory. If you are 90% of the time accurate, I usually give myself a pass. Back in the day, I used to think, nah, 4.0s, 100%, 110%, right? That is absolutely bonkers if you think as a human being, your goal is to perfect everything. It's a great motivational tool to idolize what you think is your proficient. However, people who idolize perfection, they tend to not want to practice, because when they do something once with enough credibility, they generally don't practice it anymore, right? And unfortunately, we're not, one of the human conditions, we're not robots. So if you don't practice, things become rusty. And when it becomes rusty, that doesn't mean you have to learn it again. However, the problem with that mindset is then you're unwilling to go back and practice anymore. And for me, a bit of a hot take, another hot take. Some of the most successful people, we'll put it in quotes because success looks very different, right? It depends, etc. All your terminating cliche things. But successful, there's a fundamental between all of them. It's built on practice. And practice in clever ways, in multiple ways, in all sorts of ways, because practice is usually lower effort than having to derail everything and learn something new. Now, it's a balance between the two, right? At the height of something, someone is spending a disproportionate more time practicing than they are learning. To eke out that slight advantage at the zenith of someone's skill is like 99.9% practice and 0.1% learning. So if you're already sitting there and saying, oh man, I don't look forward to doing all the 200 reviews of my Anki deck and whatnot, then keep it in mind that there is a chance that you might be burning out. Like, there's a chance that there's not enough time for you to recover, right? The things I'm emphasizing here is I can do this for hours. Like, I can do this for a while, and I know that I will, once this stream goes off, I have enough time that when I wake up tomorrow, I'll do this all over again with probably, if not equal or more energy than I had before, right? And that is due to the maintenance of this type of compartmentalization. Obviously not people have harder schedules than this. Like, I'm giving you, like, for me, I'm going over something that is probably largely relatable to maybe a university student or someone who is younger than 18. Now we're talking about adults. Let's talk about like people who have jobs and families. Then this gets even more complicated. So the idea is you raise a time to practice and you raise a time for learning. In fact, when people have jobs and family, they spend less time learning and they spend more time practicing at a pace. So what is the secret sauce of Duolingo's design that I'm not even sure the developer made a commentary on it, or other app designs? Shorter lessons, expecting that those lessons are going to be enough of the energy that's captured from learning. And then hopefully that inspires the person to practice that part for as long as possible. So Does it work? Right? One of the FAQs, does it work? It works based on the user. And I'm saying most of this stuff is because it's the consequence of using Duolingo. I don't actually do this stuff. Like before I started language learning, I have a very different management system. Like the stuff of how I'm compartmentalizing, I adjusted. So I do excessively learn in very specific period of time, and then I practice for the rest of the time. So when someone says like, "Oh, are you gonna go speak with a native Japanese speaker or stuff?" It's like, well, if a native Japanese speaker wants to hang out when I'm learning, then yes, that's a possibility. However, if it's not, then I learn and practice at my speed and desire, and then seize opportunities when they're available. Not to push it into the front line, disrupting your own schedule to seek performance and progress. It's a really intense. It can be a really intense and disruptive process, right? It's a disruptive process. So going head deep into something like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do 1,000 kanji in like 3 months, and then I'm gonna do another 1,000 kanji in 6 months. That is a very disruptive and aggressive plan. That personally, to me, that screams like youth and inexperience without discipline. It can definitely work. For others who have jobs, family, you know, a professional background or something of that sort, university, like classes and whatnot, finding when you're most able to learn without inundating yourself is probably one of the top 4 or 5 steps that you might want to reevaluate. I know that once I turn off the stream, I've done as much learning as I want for the day. So if I go and pull up a dictionary, right? This is how I feel if I had to describe. A lot of people talk about counterproductive, right? Things that are counterproductive or things that have diminished return. I usually refer to it as diminished return. There's a nuance and difference. So the reason why I say diminished return is for the most part, when people say counterproductive, they talk about waste of time, right? You wasted your time. Generally, it's about diminished return. People feel like certain things are a waste of time because they're no longer as productive as they expected. So for example, if you spend 1 hour straight up learning, you're pumped, you're ready to learn, your mindset's good, then for the rest of the day, you're like, oh, I'm going to squeeze in some learning here. I'm going to squeeze in some learning here. That can feel over time counterproductive because you're going to get diminished return, largely because you continue to learn when you aren't in the best state of mind or ready to learn, right? That's why classrooms have times. They have schedules. You plan to learn. You arrive planning to learn. If you don't arrive planning to learn, then you don't learn. If you don't want to go to class, you're not going to learn very much. You might get some diminished return because it's counterproductive, right? How many times does someone say classes are a waste of time? Because largely, it's really not a waste of time. It's a diminished return. You're not interested, it diminishes your return on the time that you use. You're not interested in a subject, you'll learn less over time, per unit time, right? Now, think about it in self-study. There is a maximum, or what I call a ideal, maybe a ratio. We're gonna say, I don't want to use the word ideal, a ratio. So when I'm learning here, my ratio is probably 1-to-1 because I'm ready. I'm planning, I do everything, I try to work everything as best as I can. When I'm done streaming, I'm just chilling. I'm practicing. And practicing is doing everything that I've learned. I put it into practice. I'm not learning anymore. Now, this is different from someone who keeps spending a large majority of their time, like arguably an even larger majority of their time, when they go and learn, but not prepared to learn. And that goes with psychologically. So here's a hypothetical situation. You do your Anki deck and you're like wired. You're going, the first thing you do in the morning, you're wired, you're ready. The Anki sets the environment. So when you're on your Anki, you've already told yourself, I'm ready to learn, I'm hardwired. Then suddenly you're done. And now you have the rest of the day. Like you blast through Anki. Like 30 minutes, you get through 1,000 cards, right? It's something absurd, right? You're really wired, you're really focused. Then you stop for the rest of the day. Now you have the rest of the day. And you're like, oh, I'm going to read some manga. And I'm going to try to learn something. Like, oh, hey, what does this word is? You take out dictionary and you're like, okay, well, that's what it is. Let's go back. Manga, stop. So your activity that you usually enjoy, regardless if you can read it or not, right? Because you didn't make it into it. So you're deliberately going to alter the way you interact with your manga in order to squeeze in more learning. But you're squeezing in more learning. So that amount of time is going to give diminished return. It'll still teach you things. It'll still make you learn things. However, you're jamming more things to remember while you're already trying to remember things for tomorrow. So you've already front-loaded all your Anki knowledge that you're doing, and you're hopefully, combining practice with Anki. Kind of does both, so this isn't the greatest example, but Anki also weaves in practicing and learning. For me, I learn when I learn and I practice when I practice, right? And then Wanikani is now introducing the reality to the matter. Some people might be practicing actually most of the time than learning. With that said though, when you're squeezing in learning everywhere else, it's an exercise in diminished return. As in, you want to enjoy this anime, but you keep interrupting your enjoyment of the anime to half learn things. Like, oh, okay, I'll learn this. All right, let's look at the dictionary. To me, that's close to passive learning. You're looking up something, and then the next time it's like it comes up again. It's like, wait, what was that? Okay, let's go look at the dictionary. So you're constantly not in the mood or in the mindset of learning, largely because it's like half and half. Like, oh, I'm here, I want to enjoy this manga. Well, then enjoy the manga, right? You've learned a lot of things. And I'm not saying everyone has like a fixed maximum capacity for learning. However, there is a diminished return happening, right? It takes me more effort. So let's say I need to remember 100 items. As this number goes up, the effort goes way up. The effort is higher than the amount of things. So as the amount of things go up, the effort goes up faster. So you're trying to remember 100 things, and you already spent your whole day learning already, and then you go and continue to sparsely learn some more. The odds are that you can start to forget things as you're rolling over. So recency ends up taking hold a lot of times. The stuff that you learned last, maybe like that dictionary term, yeah, it might stick. Or you're so tired that none of that sticks because you didn't give it enough time to either practice or rest. You did not rest at all. There's no space, right? And that's not an easy, I'm not going to say it's an easy task. To make it quote unquote a little bit easier for myself, I have negotiated those times. I choose when I learn and I choose when I practice. And that's how I made it a little bit more manageable. If you're goated with like self-awareness and stuff, you can choose to learn and practice at the same time throughout your entire day. Feel free. um the things that I'm stating here still applies to those people. They know when to stop because they're getting diminished return, right? There's going to be a point in which, yeah, if I study much more or review much more, it's not going to do a substantial amount of difference other than waiting, resting, and seeing how tomorrow works. So yes, there's an upper limit to when you should rest and stop taking in learning stuff. And that upper limit, I don't know what that is. It could be forever. It could be 24 hours for all I care. The thing I'm concerned about is the psychological impact of your habit. If you're constantly learning, then learning is going to get dull. Like learning that thing is going to feel like a chore. It's going to feel terrible, or it's likely going to feel exhausting. So the next day when you go and approach your Anki deck again, you're like, wait, it feels like I didn't even stop learning. And then suddenly you get the YouTube, the influencer, right? The influencer that says, you know what I dislike about Anki? It feels like I spent most of my life on Anki. Like it almost feels like every day, every waking hour, I'm devoted to Anki. Right? I think a lot of people have heard these. If they were looking for best methods and whatnot, they probably heard an influencer say this, right? That's largely because there wasn't, in my opinion, there wasn't a psychological separation between when they stop learning and when they're practicing. You can still practice things, or you can enjoy things, or you can even not practice. There is a psychological distinction. It has to be intentional, though, in my opinion. Passiveness is not sufficient a lot of times for people to prevent burnout. So you burn out. And here's one thing that came from someone sharing an influencer's hot take. That influencer, whatever their new thing they're plugging, they're going to burn out on that too, in my opinion. Because when they were talking about it and how they were interacting, it feels like they're just replacing something that they burn out with something that they're going to use until they burn out, and the cycle continues. It didn't talk about the psychological impact of doing Anki so frequently or so, like, etc. In my opinion, a lot of the hot takes and whatnot, a lot of the hot takes that I see is you're exchanging something for another thing, and that new thing is exciting. It's incredibly exciting. It doesn't feel like you're doing the same thing, and it will work. And you go through another cycle. You burn out of that thing, you go through another cycle. That can work for a lot of people. Actually, a lot of like really, really brilliant people, that's what they do. They ham on something and then they move on to the next topic. They ham on something. That's perfectly adequate. If you're like those people and you know it's happening, those people know it's happening, so they manage that. They expect a burnout. They cope with it. Like they build the routine around. For me, I'm a consistency person, so I keep burnout at bay. The stuff that I'm talking about is my way of negotiating burnout. You will not see me stop for any other reason other than something else is more interesting. From like most of the time, like if you have me, like, as you know, a lot of people ask, oh, are you gonna stop Duolingo? It's like, no, I'm not, but there are other things as well that take up time. Like I wish I could do all of it at once, but it's not physically possible. Like time, there's only enough time. So I don't drop things because they're boring or they're not interesting. I drop things because there are more interesting things than the thing I dropped, right? Or the thing that I'm compromising on. So what all of this says, that I wanted to share today is, collectively, that's how I see a lot of people's relationship with language learning right now. it's a very different problem, quote unquote, problem that they see compared to like formal education, like classrooms and stuff. How do you negotiate classrooms? Well, you reduce the amount of effort to do those classrooms and redistribute your effort in something else. So like you go to math class and you hate math class. Well, what do? You negotiate all your energy, so you turn off your brain and you decide, I'm not going to learn anything from math. It's like, that's great. It liberates a lot of energy, pragmatic speaking, to other things you're focused on. So yeah, you get a C in math, but you get an A plus in physics. I know that's a terrible example, but the idea is you do negotiate that type of thing already. The difference here is self-study. You're choosing to create that environment for yourself. So everything is something you want. That it does not teach you how to not want it because it's healthy for you, right? There's a time to learn Japanese, and then there's a time to practice Japanese. And one of the most disheartening things I've seen in terms of patterns is a progressive disinterest in language learning propagated by creating learning opportunities, maximizing learning opportunities during the lifestyle, right? However, it doesn't create time to rest or appreciate how much you worked and learned, right? What is cue that person that says, I don't want to speak Japanese or use Japanese until I reached XYZ. I don't want to talk to other language learners or use English with Japanese because that can inherently produce terrible habits. To me, those are individuals who are likely going to burn out. Not that they all are guaranteed to burn out. The idea is they're going to have to find a different source of management for them, because you're not going to appreciate. It's going to be really, really difficult for those individuals to appreciate how hard they're working. And without that appreciation, it's very difficult to know when they are working too hard. When you overload, you can work harder each time. Like, yeah, this time, oh, you can only study for 10 minutes. But tomorrow, you might be able to study for 12 minutes, 14 minutes, 16 minutes. It takes discipline, in my opinion, to gauge how well you learn. For me, it's 8 hours, right? But I started at like 10 minutes. The idea is you're trying to find your management, where you manage. Going in the deep end and always going full clutch, it's not creating a disciplined balance between things. So burnout happens because, well, you didn't control the burn. The burn was not a steady burn, for lack of a better metaphor. So this is what I wanted to share. One of the bigger things that I wanted to share by introducing whatever I'm doing for managing my Duolingo stuff, right? And then let's do some lightning round stuff. I'm not going to talk about all of this stuff, I guess. Let's see. Wanikani, balance, Duolingo, studying, future things. Let's just skip future things. And then changes in Duolingo. I introduced the stories. And do's and don'ts, like tentative things, 15% through the course. Oh, okay, that's fine. We'll cover some of that in the Chinese review. A breakdown, background practicing, not on stream. I covered that. So let's do some frequently asked questions, right? I think this is something that lots of people are doing, and it's kind of a great way to break the ice and end with things. So we'll do some frequently asked questions. Almost 3 a.m. Local time. So FAQs. And it will be related to a lot of the things I'm talking about now. Tangentially, when people ask me questions, I learn more about them through the questions they ask me. And then when I respond, I get to learn a little bit more if they stay around. So these are some of the we're gonna say the FAQs greatest hits so far in the like the I don't know the past 100 days or so or more. So one of the FAQs is it's not as funny as I'm smirking. I'm not. It's not supposed to be funny. FAQs. One of the top ones that I've had in the past 100 days is versions of do you. I'm trying to capture like the. It's basically how do you split studying between Chinese and Japanese? And this is a very reasonable question. It's not really worded this way. Most people, you learn kanji / Hanzi? How do you learn? Yeah. So this is more or less the same thing. Every versions of this. So there are plenty of versions. I'm trying to write it in a more agreeable way, but usually it's more direct. Like, how do you split? How do you split Chinese and Japanese? Or what do you do to split them? So what that tells me is this person is assuming I do. Like assuming I have to split these, or, split the studying, the literal studying. It's like, well, yes, I kind of have to split the literal studying. So the question, the various responses that I would say is, yes, I do schedule. And it's on my, yes, that's another question, but we're gonna have to go one by one. It's too soon. So I schedule, right? YouTube and Twitch has the full record of how I quote unquote split my learning lessons. So I do split my learning lessons, right? I do Wanikani first, Hanzi Hero, and then I fit in every other day with Duolingo. Right? That's the current kind of pattern. However, when it comes to studying, this is the learning part. So the things I do on stream. However, even then, I don't split them. Like, I try not to split them. In fact, I'm consciously doing the opposite. I'm combining them at every opportunity. So when I'm on Wanikani, I'm thinking about the things I learned on Hanzi Hero. And when I'm using these two, I'm thinking about the things I've learned on Duolingo. Like, it's not like I stopped saying, oh yeah, okay, let's just forget everything I learned on Duolingo when I'm using this. There's no splitting. They're together. And when it comes to Chinese and Japanese, they interact with each other, right? They're laddering. Hanzi and kanji are related. So whenever there's an opportunity, I don't split them. And when there isn't an opportunity, that means the other thing doesn't exist yet. So what does that mean? I wouldn't be studying that thing or practicing that thing anyways because I didn't learn it yet. So like when I ask, oh, how do I say this in Chinese? Oh, I don't know. Okay. I'm practicing Chinese when I'm learning Japanese. So I'm using the terminology, right? So I practice Chinese when I'm learning Japanese. So if studying is learning and practicing combined, I don't split them. I practice Chinese when I'm learning Japanese. And even more so, after the stream goes off, I practice both at once. So sometimes on and off, it's not simultaneous because you can't really do it simultaneously. You go back and forth. So you don't necessarily split. I incentivize for them to be combined. Okay? So then it leads to the next question that's often any version of do you confuse Chinese and Japanese? Right? That is a very, very common question. And the answer is yes. And the answer is it's useful. So, it says, do you confuse them? That means you only need one instance, right? One instance in which you confuse them to suggest that the answer is yes. Now, if I were to talk about this from a consistency standpoint, so when people don't talk about like one instance, it's always constantly one instance when they ask questions, right? Do you confuse Japanese or Chinese? So if I do it once, then the answer is yes. That's how these are phrased. Do you something? Usually you, in a more frequency standpoint, is like how often, or do you experience disruptions? Like how often things happen, right? It takes into frequency. So consistently, the answer is no. Overall, I don't actually confuse them. In fact, the times when I do confuse them are the times that help me learn more and practice more. You think the grammar and sounds are so different between them that there wouldn't be too much interference when speaking, and you think maybe kanji reading would be an area to confuse? We're talking about all of it, so we're not making any excuses here. So no exclusions. We're talking about the whole shebang. So whenever confusion happens, it's actually a useful thing. So why are you confused, right? So why did I confuse them? How did I confuse them? And how do I not confuse them? And how could I use that as a learning lesson? To me, this is part of laddering languages. It doesn't matter. I don't focus on whether they are confusing or not, or would be confusing. I evaluate and see if I do get confused, and I learn from that. And I do have some hot takes, but they're still in development, so I wouldn't be comfortable in saying that things like grammar, sounds, or anything specifically proper that interferes or not interferes. What I have discovered so far, tentatively, is that confusions are resolved far more quicker and more memorable than when they don't overlap. So when kanji and hanzi overlaps, they are stronger points. They are easier to remember and faster learned permanently, as opposed to the other way around. So when people think about, oh, Chinese and Japanese may overlap and that can create confusion, I say if they overlap and can create confusion, they are likely more the easier things to learn because they do overlap and therefore reinforce each other. You are prone to focusing on things that are nuanced in relations, much like looking at differences. However, differences often means you're remembering two different things with a trick, with a little bit of a trick. You can associate the differences deliberately by saying they're different, like antonyms, for example. When you know bad, you know good. When you know Chinese, you know Japanese. So there is a rhyme and way to benefit from relational learning. So how do I learn Japanese grammar? I relate it to English grammar. Well, what's a different approach? spend all your time forgetting English grammar so it doesn't confuse, so you don't get it confused with Japanese grammar. Like, I don't do that, or I try not to do that. I think it takes a lot of effort. Kudos to those people who work really, really well with compartmentalization. But if you're constantly focusing on differences, you're remembering double the things, or you're spending a lot of effort trying to forget things that you would naturally remember instead of focusing on how to leverage them to learn something else. So, for example, one of the bigger hot takes, which I will probably get opponents over time, is that stop translating. And I kind of agree with that, actually. Stop translating. As in taking one-to-one English to Japanese translations. Like, oh yeah, that is quite slow, right? I think the word that I would add to this is stop passively translating. Like, oh yeah, I don't know why I, say, like, let's do an example. Like when I write iku, am I thinking about to go? No, I'm not thinking about to go. This is the first thing that came to mind, iku, right? However, the reason why I can do this is I focused on what it is that I need to know in relation between these two. Not trying to pretend like I don't know what this is and then force myself to learn this. It takes a lot of effort to not try to do something that you've already done. So how do I get to go to make it easier to remember iku, right? What does wanikani do? They use mnemonics. And that's kind of what I do too. So whenever I think about to go, it's effortless to remember to go. Like I don't even, like, I'm saying to go, but I'm thinking iku in my head. So then in the future, it goes the other way around. When I think of iku, I think of to go, because I'm not thinking about only using one language. I'm thinking about using both the languages. So that might not jive with other people. Other people want to only speak Japanese. So I'm not in that territory. So let me make a disclaimer. I'm not in the market to speak only Japanese. I'm not in the market to only speak Chinese. That's not my market. My market is I want to speak all three at the same time. So the things that I focus on is how to leverage what I know in English to understand Japanese. And then in the future, how do I leverage Japanese to learn more English or to learn more Chinese, right? I'm leveraging Japanese to learn more Chinese, even though I know a lot of Chinese grammar in which I leverage to know about Japanese. The idea is I'm focusing on the interaction between them. I'm not focusing on separating them. And these questions here, do you confuse Chinese or Japanese? Do you split Chinese or Japanese? Right? These are keywords. I do not have a lot of ways to help or find recommendations. So oftentimes when I answer these questions, I make sure to establish like I don't separate them. And yes, I do confuse them, but I'm actually looking for it. I'm looking for the things that relate the languages together. It's not a bad thing that I don't want. So after I establish this consequence, then I go and concede, right? Because some people will say there's the next follow-up question. Does learning Chinese help you learn Japanese, and vice versa? This is the next most common question. And what they're looking for is, are these synergistic? And oftentimes people are talking about, does it speed up the process? Speed up the process is often what they're talking about. Or is it faster if you know one or the other? And this comes with the whole mentality of splitting them. These are two different things, right? They are confusing, they're splitting, and again, I can't answer this question really well because the theme is that they are one and the same. When I learn Japanese, I get closer to learning Chinese. When I learn Chinese, I get closer to learning Japanese. So the answer technically is yeah, yes, it does, but not the way you think. For me, not the way you think. Right? Cue the same, but different. How is it different? When I'm learning Chinese and Japanese, it actually slows both of them down individually. So, to someone, if I tell someone, say, oh yeah, yes, it does help me, right? And then someone comes in and is like, no, it doesn't. You spend like double the amount of time and you're like constantly confusing this with that. Like you're wasting time. It's like, no, I'm not. Like, this is where the mindset is different, right? So it's difficult to communicate. So I have to be very careful about it. Instead of saying, no, I'm not, you just don't understand, I'll try. When you're learning two different things, the sum of them might be faster than learning both of them individually. So if you're learning Japanese and, or Chinese at any given time, so you spend your time focusing on Japanese and you decide, oh man, I gotta make sure I never think about Chinese. Let's never think about Chinese, right? When I'm learning Japanese. And then when you go to focus on Chinese, you're like, never think about Japanese. Like, oh, I can't think about Japanese. This is what I'm saying is yes. I learn faster, in my opinion. I learn faster and have a higher quality per time not separating these, having them together. So when I'm learning Japanese, I'm learning Chinese or practicing Chinese. When I'm learning Chinese, I'm practicing Japanese. The time is spent together. So hear me out. Why is this a no? So I would say no to these people. Why is that? Because they're asking, does learning Chinese help Japanese? So they're saying, like, if they're only interested in Chinese and they're only interested in Japanese, does learning another language help? The answer usually is a no, because it's going to be slower for one language. It usually is. It's going to be slower because your efforts is divided between two languages. So it's true. It's true. Like, you need to, like, I agree with most of the critics. If you're laddering a language, it's gonna slow your progress in one of the languages. Largely because you're divided between two languages. So it's not violating, like, it's not some life hack, in my opinion. I'm not saying it's some, like, life hack where you're not still expending more energy and more time, right? The idea is you're not comparing, I only care about Chinese, and you're learning Japanese on the side so you can boost your Chinese aptitude. That's what that question, in my opinion, is asking. Oh, I'm interested in Japanese, but I kind of want to learn Chinese on the side because it might help my Japanese. That's not what I'm saying here, right? But that is the question being asked. So I would say no, it doesn't help you. So it defaults to the other hot take. One of the hot takes is learn one language until you don't want to learn anymore. Until you like aren't learning anymore, right? And then go to another language. And you use, now that you're not like learning, like you're not completely focused, like you're done with Japanese. Say you're to a point where you're passively learning now, you're passively practicing. Then you go to Chinese. And then intuitively, you're no longer focusing on learning Japanese anymore. You're practicing Japanese when you're looking at Chinese. So effectively, you could do what I'm doing, which you mix the two and you're learning them two at the same point, or you can stagger them permanently so that you don't have to worry about needing to learn two things simultaneously, right? Because some of the things I practice, I need to learn in Japanese. Some of the things I need to learn in Chinese, I need to learn in Japanese. And in the end of the day, you probably get to the same goal in a reasonable time, right? Same-ish, but different goal. If you theoretically yourself, you're like comparing yourself. If you're comparing your hypothetical twin in a parallel universe and you did these two things, you're probably gonna get to the same goal with satisfaction. I'm not saying how fast or short or who's faster. It's probably reasonably negligible. As in, like, you'll probably get there in the same place. So which one do you enjoy more is probably the question I would ask. Do you enjoy thinking everything is separate? Do you enjoy, does it help you learn something by separating the language? Because that is a very, very important question. I grew up having to juggle 3 languages, and 2 of them I have no idea what's going on paper, and 1 of them I do. How do I retain that language even though no one is actively forcing me to retain it? This. All of my Fujianese is attached to my English. The reason why I still know all my Fujianese, in which, like, the necessary Fujianese, conversationally, is that I know all their English counterparts. And that's how I acquire new Fujianese. Fujianese is not taught formally, and there's no way to write it. So I asked my parents, like, oh, how do you say this? And I try to describe it in Fujianese, and then they describe that, and then I can tell them what the English is in the next time. They constantly ask me what an English word is, right? And I try to describe it in Fujianese, and then I ask them, what is this? Now, I don't even do that. When they ask me what an English word is, I would say it in Mandarin, and they know the Mandarin counterpart, and then I would ask them what the Fujianese term is. So then I'm learning Mandarin. I'm practicing Mandarin to learn Fujianese while translating and practicing English using Fujianese. So that's kind of the world I live in. That is the normal dynamics. It's the very common dynamics that I have. And for me, I'm leveraging that. I don't think that's for everyone. So it's all transparent. Like, I'm trying to be as transparent as possible. Oftentimes, what am I like? So here's an example of why I'm like this. I think like this for something else. I just talked about it. When you're separating practicing and studying, I do that. Lots of people actually practice and study at the same time, or practice and learn at the same time. When they're language learning, they're juggling 2 tasks over and over again. When you're watching anime, you're trying to learn and practice all at the same time, and it is possible. It can work. When you're really, really engaged, you can get it to work. I ended up doing the split thing. I split when I learn, and I split when I practice, right? Largely, like, it's not exclusive, obviously, because when you use Wanikani or Anki, you're also doing some practice. Duolingo, you're also doing some practice, like day 1, day 2. I broke down day 1, day 2 already. The idea is we're juggling these things all the time. You choose how to leverage them. in the end, it's true, all of the above. Like if you have someone who's learned language for like 16 years and they're saying this is true, and then you have another person who's like like a polyglot and they disagree with this person, who's right? Oftentimes, when push comes to shove, like when those people sit down and talk to each other and like accumulate, it turns out that there's an ounce of truth to all of it. Like all of it can persist. And for me, this is why for these three biggest questions that I've gotten recently since I've started last time, they're all yes or no questions. I can say yes and no to all of these, and it deals with the perception that they have. Yes, it helps, and no, it doesn't help. What are you interested in? So when I get these questions, I ask them, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by help? Are you only interested in Japanese? Are you only interested in Chinese? Do you combine them? Are you like me where I would like to use, use English to benkyou suru, right? Like if I was studying Japanese o benkyou suru, right? What do you think, ne? Right? Like, どうですか? Right? Like, what do you want? Like, なぜ? どうやって? How are you gonna go about it? So the idea is, find out what is working, and I often like to challenge people to do this. And all this discussion, it's not a prescription. Please, I want to re-emphasize, you do not have to do any of these things. The cool thing about saying things that you might not agree with or might not disagree with is then you go out and prove it for yourself, right? Hearing constantly everyone agreeing on the same things may convince you that things are the way they are, and then when you do them and it doesn't work, then you're like, well, what gives? Am I broke? Am I just stupid? Like, why do it work for like everybody I hear, but it doesn't work for me? And that sucks. Personally, if that happens to something about learning, it can really, really hurt a person. Like I fear oftentimes when it comes to the internet, the amount of lack of self-esteem when I projected in people's comments towards me, right, is coming from a place that's always fearful. It tends to be fearful. So the questions often is a fear of something. Like, how do you split studying between Chinese and Japanese? That's suggesting there's a sacrifice. So there's no particular way in which you can have both. Like, you can do both. So, well, I don't split them. I try to maximize use of both of them at the same time. Whether it's a split or not, it's yes and no. It's technically splitting them, but not splitting them in the way that this person is asking. Do I confuse them? Yes, I do confuse them. But it's not because, like, this person didn't ask, oh, does the overlap help you remember things? It's not phrased in a positive manner. It's, do you confuse them? You're worried about bad things happening. Splitting, that suggests a sacrifice or an exchange. Confused, that's plain bad. And then sometimes this is like, does it help? Does learning Chinese help Japanese? That's suggesting that one is serving the purpose of the other, right? It's not going both ways. So it's softer, which is nice because they use the word help, but that's my words. I'm using my words. Usually they say things like, do you think Chinese, when learning Chinese, it gets in the way of learning Japanese? Right? I'm paraphrasing a lot of these questions, but generally it's about negatives. It's about things that worry you, like an old classic. We'll throw in an old classic question sometimes. oftentimes I have to answer the question like someone out of the blue, right? Someone out of the blue corrects me, and then it leads to a discussion. It's like, okay, thank you for pointing that out. I usually trust myself. I trust myself to correct the mistake eventually, right? And I would suggest and I detail most of the things. How do I review and how do I cover for mistakes, right? Review for mistakes. And what happens immediately, the question that follows is, okay, this person is going to think of the worst case scenario in order to challenge me. And they say, but what happens? What happens if you don't correct the mistake? Or what happens? What happens if that mistake, you don't detect the mistake? You don't detect the mistake, right? Because the mistakes that you don't see, you can't fix. You can't fix what you don't see, right? Quote unquote fix. Now, that is a great example of the type of interaction I have with not even language learning alone. Largely it deals with language learning because the last year I've been doing this for most of the time, but video games as well. They tell you and assume the worst case scenario. And at first, my first thought would be like, I don't think of it that way. I try, the word is try. I try not to preoccupy myself with these thoughts. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think this is a possibility. It is possible. It is possible that there are going to be things. And here's the follow-up. Before I even finish answering this question or trying to answer this question, the person's like, yeah, then you develop a bad habit. Then you develop a bad habit, and then you'll waste your time. You'll waste your time unlearning the bad habit, right? And conservatively, you could take this for face value or however you want to interpret it. The first thing is, I don't usually think preoccupied with the worst case scenario, largely because I trust my process and my interactions with others. So my process has a lot of fail-safes. And I try to cover them as much as I can in these reviews. Like, I'm illustrating what I do. You know, I recall every day. I look at my review every 25 days. I review and retrospect every 50 days. Every year, I go over all the stuff that I've done up to this point. I record most things. There are a lot of fail-safes. Now, they might not be apparent, right? Because this person is a stranger. Right? This person is a stranger, so there's no way I could communicate most of that. So I'm not telling that person to trust me. I'm telling that person I trust my process. I trust that my process and the way I interact with other people, it takes a very, very long time to get to this state. As in, I would have to be so obviously ignorant and blind to something in order to do something so long that the bad habit becomes a waste of time in which I unlearn the bad habit. I don't think in my time, for a very long time now, that it has come to that. Now, why is that the case? But let's go and tackle this. What happens if I do a bad habit? I turn it into something useful. That sounds like, oh, you just play more kind of thing. Well, let's think about this. Turn it into something. So what does turn it into something useful mean? Well, I can figure out how I'm doing this bad habit, why I'm doing this bad habit, and how do I change it? There's no unlearning the bad habit. I'm changing the nature of that habit. And then that nature, how I learn to change and why I change it is functional. It's functional for future purposes. How do I get into the routine of picking up new routines? So 2025, I already started Wanikani and I already started Hanza Hero. It's already getting close to a month each, right? And I'm juggling more than I've ever juggled before, largely because I know how, in my opinion, I have done a lot of this. I create new habits, I refine new habits all the time. So when someone says, oh, then you develop bad habits and then you have to waste your time unlearning it, it's someone who, in my opinion, fear habits, know how hard they are, and to me, it's usually because they are inexperienced. Inexperienced or avoidant. So when you're inexperienced or avoidant, of course this is gonna sound really, really bad. It's like the worst case scenario. When I see bad habits, my thought is turn into something useful. Now, it sounds trivial to me, largely because I do it all the time. I pick up new habits, I pick up new things. I spend most of the time, so I have to be sensitive to that. It sucks when someone lives an optimized life and then they found that one of their optimized habits need to be changed fundamentally. That requires all the energy necessary to create that. Because largely, if you don't practice making new habits, changing habits, like for example, self-improvements, consistent self-improvements, if you're proactive and consistently working on self-improvement, you constantly have to tweak habits. And obviously I would do a shout out to like atomic habits, right? Atomic habits, the idea of atomic habits. You're tweaking, you're constantly tweaking. So the whole idea of saying you practice something so much that it became a bad habit without you knowing, that's weird to me personally. It's not, you do not have my empathy. I cannot empathize with the state of mind in which you think making one mistake and then somehow it goes on forever without you noticing while you're tweaking things along the way to suddenly become a habit that is unlearnable or become a waste of time. That is suggesting that you cut out everything in between. There are so many things that can happen in between, and it is still possible for a lot of people. Smoking, drinking, depression, unhealthy diet, lack of exercise. That habit can develop without you ever noticing because you're not actively thinking about it. Today, Gecko and I crossed a possible topic about transparency, right? Wanikani, we were talking about Wanikani and even Duolingo, transparency about what you're going to get, right? Oftentimes you can plan for these things when they're very transparent. So when we were talking about the algorithm is less transparent, right? It's less transparent, and you might be saying, oh, okay, so people might subconsciously or unintentionally become subverted by the lack of transparency. My argument was, oftentimes, regardless of the transparency, right, it's a moot point. largely because if someone is passively using something, they don't observe regardless of how transparent it is. So you could have the greatest tool man-made has ever made, and this person, if they passively do it, they're not going to take that away from it. Like, what I mean is they're not going to learn of the tool. They're using whatever the tool is designed to give passively. So when you're thinking about Wanikani and Duolingo, I don't treat Wanikani and Duolingo as in, oh, Wanikani only does this, so I can only learn this. Duolingo does this, and I keep making the mistake because Duolingo keeps making this mistake. I can correct it. I can look for other things. Now I'm using Wanikani and Duolingo. I'll see the interactions between them, right? I bring in other knowledge. The sole purpose of me highlighting this interaction is largely because you don't detect it, would suggest that this person has experienced this. And I've already encountered a lot of intellectual equals, in my opinion. Like very, very intellectual people, but they constantly do this thing where they project like they can predict my future on the basis that somehow, some way, they're saving me the pain of developing a bad habit without me noticing. Like, my only thought that can be possible in reconciling how such an intelligent person, lots of people who've gone through mistakes, verified mistakes, learned from their mistakes, and became very competent Japanese speakers. My only thought is, if you are projecting that I will end up like you, doesn't that just mean that I can see it and I'll learn Japanese by the time you learn Japanese? Why is it so hard to think that I can't be like you? It's a little weird, but or be different than you. So this whole like unlearning bad habits thing, that's a hot take here. That summarizes, I would say, if I had to say 60% of questions deal with the fear of basically this. And if you start with Duolingo, and if you stream Duolingo, bump that up to 90%. Not hardcore. That's a little hyperbolic, but for me, anecdotally, 90%, 9 out of 10 times, the question deals with inferring that somehow people are so ignorant and so unaware of their habit formation that even with transparency and understanding the pros and cons about Duolingo and Wanikani and how they're designed, the CEO can go out and write down exactly what Duolingo is intended to do by design and Wanikani. That does not change the idea that people can overlook something, right? And that overlooking something ends up projecting back onto any new learner or someone who's seen as earlier stage, right? And that's out of compassion. That's kindness, right? That's kindness. Maybe perhaps kindness born out of fear, which the internet does really, really well. The internet does it very, very well. Do I have any fear of developing bad habits? Well, the very, very worst case scenario that's very real for most people would be my pitch accent sucks. Right? Pitch accent sucks. It's like, well, then so be it. When you're talking to someone like that, in my opinion, when someone is asking a question and then they say they care about you and they keep finding the worst case scenario for you and convince you that you're going to have problems later on, that's a gaslight. And it might not be a malicious gaslight. It's a kindness born out of fear. That's a gaslight. So when I ask myself, am I okay with forming a professional relationship with or a internal relationship with someone, like maybe for future prospects and whatnot, The last thing I want to do is have someone who constantly looks for the worst case scenario in order to make an argument about my decision making. That is unintentional. Unintentional. So not malicious. Non-malicious. And most people say, well, you can't gaslight someone if it's not malicious. So that's why I'm qualifying it, right? I'm qualifying it. It might not constantly be a gaslight. I'm trying to be very, very considerate in the idea that a fear, a kindness born out of fear can seem very, very important. So it's not a gaslight. Gaslight often is a negative connotation, right? It means that someone's trying to manipulate someone else for a gain. Well, when you're trying to be kind and you think you're kind, that is a selfish gain, but it's not malicious. So you can, yes, in my opinion, unintentionally gaslight someone by actually gaslighting them. Like, what I mean is, you're trying to convince someone to stop doing something because you fear for the worst. Now, that to me sounds intentional. However, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, right? Unless there's one big caveat. That person themselves fear everything. Right? So on the internet, some of the things that these questions have told me or experienced for me is that fear feeds on itself a lot of times. Like, oh man, should I drop Duolingo because I'm afraid it might be slowing me down. That's what a lot of people are saying. Like, maybe I should switch to Anki. And then 6 months later, it's like, oh man, Anki is not doing it for me. I've heard from all the people around me that they eventually fall out of love in Anki. The algo is providing confirmation. And then if language learners, in my opinion, the most vocal language learners out there are saying, don't do this, don't do that. If you do this, this is going to happen. If you do this, and usually it's negative stuff. It's often avoid doing all these things because you'll enter a trap. The last time I checked, right? And it wasn't language learning. The last time I checked, I watched tons of videos about how to start drawing. Like, how do you draw? Because 4 years ago, I thought, yeah, let's do it. Let's draw. We're going to do this. So I started watching a couple of videos. And boy, howdy, do I feel like it's a competitive process on trying to keep fear at bay while having tons of people yell at you at what the best way of doing things are. So I've been down this road, in my opinion, many, many times before. I love acquiring skills, and the rodeo does not change very much when it comes to being influenced consistently based on the fear of not doing the best. Or using your time the most efficiently. It's not that, like, I'm gonna say, not entirely one-sided anymore. There are people who say, hey, here's my anecdotal experience. I want to share with you what I did to get to this point. And let me tell you, there are other people who also do other things. You should check these people out. Well, while I'm in this subject matter, let me show you what I did. And this is the stuff that the problems that I've encountered. And if this sounds like you, maybe some of these things will help, right? Instead of if you're doing this, oh, jeez, you picked the wrong thing, man. Oh, you're using Blender? Man, you should have been using Maya. Oh my gosh, like you just ruined your life. Or like, oh man, if you don't start coding in Godot, like you're gonna miss the train, man. You got to drop that Unity stuff. Sorry, Unity. Or like, oh man, why would you learn Python? Like all the people are hitting up C++ right now. That that type of thing. Language learning is no different online at the moment, but maybe it'll change in the future. It doesn't really hurt me too much, right? Um, the idea is when you unintentionally gaslight someone who's already fear of everything, you're gonna stop them from learning the language in the first place, in my opinion. Like you're likely to. And I even have a habit of saying you are going to, but no, you are more likely going to add to the amount of things they have to worry about. The last thing I want to do is someone say like, oh yeah, I just learned Adu and Idu today. I learned the difference between Adu and Idu. And then the first thing you're thinking about is, oh man, what are all the problems that I have? Wait, Hope, before you go, let me tell you about the 14 and 15 different considerations before you go, because I'm just going to stack a lot of things on you and then tell you of all the things you should avoid. Like my usual impressions now, that was my like impressions of early days, how people interacted with me. They constantly say these things like, oh hey, Adu and Idu, how does this work? And then someone's like, oh wait, let me tell you so you don't get confused. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Like, I mean, it's hard to get confused when I didn't even learn the thing yet. But all right, go ahead. It's like, okay, so you do this, and I'm helping you here. Like you do this, Don't make sure you don't do this. And then the next time I did it, like I actually got them confused. The person, I see what I mean. Like that's exactly why that's a problem. I'm like, I don't see a problem. I mean, I'm still learning these things. Like, do you expect me to get this right away? Like, how does this work? Is this going to be the type of relationship we have? Like, you're going to sit here and tell me everything about my future, and you're telling me that all the problems you have will become my problems? Well, that sounds fine because you know Japanese now and I don't. Isn't that great? Like, laugh with me, I suppose, and then remind me, go get him. Like, I see. Like, do you want me to explain this? It's like, sure, why not? I can't promise you I'll remember the stuff, but let's just go at it together. It's a very different dynamic. I think in the beginning, even before Wanikani, actually Wanikani has been something else, really. Actually, okay, there were once or twice people were explaining Wanikani things to me over and over again, which obviously that implies that they don't understand what my background is anymore. And I usually try to be very clear, it's no longer from zero. But I do feel that the vast majority of people who want to go into language learning are inundated by kind people, very kind people, who built, and I'm going to be a little bit presumptuous in it, have quite a baggage. They have quite a lot of baggage. And that baggage ends up being born out of fear and unintentionally making someone want to second consider the language they're learning. I am guilty of convincing other people, I would say. I think I have evidence now. I'm guilty of convincing other people to give up, to like change their efforts in the language. But it's not because I used fear. Personally, I have anecdotal experience now that I've convinced other people to learn Japanese and Chinese, or like pivot to Japanese or Chinese, because I'm encouraging. As in, like, I like doing this. I like talking about how Japanese and Chinese are confusing. Like, quote unquote, I even use the same language. Like, hey, look, this is confusing. Isn't that funny? Like, hey, I don't know what this is about. Like, Japanese decided they think north and south comes before east and west, but Chinese think east and west comes before north and south, and then English decides that north and south comes before east and west. What the dip? Like, what's going on? Laugh with me, because we're gonna do it together, right? Instead of, wait, don't forget, like, be worried, right? The next time you'll sound like a doofus if you accidentally put east before north in Japanese, and then you decided to do the opposite and write northeast in a direct translation in Chinese. This is a kind of a thing, though. This is a kind of thing. The order in which you put north and east can change the meaning of things. Like dongxi is different. That's thing. So, and those are just two cardinal directions put together, right? And I could have phrased it in that way. I'm like, oh yeah, but think about it this way. You can mess up this, you can mess up this. I try not to do that as much as I can. So that's the take-home message for me. If I had a take-home message for this section, I try to be as encouraging as possible. And encouraging is often using humor a lot of times for me. Humor in a sense that humor perpetuates knowledge and awareness. And that awareness stops people from giving up. I think it's too much. I don't know how much more I can emphasize. There's just so much fear going around, and you're choosing to do something, right? I think too many people worry about optimization and efficiency because of fear, yeah. But the only thing that really matters is time in. As long as you never quit, you get to your destination. Yes, and hear me out. There's one last thing that we have to keep in mind, which I did, or that I like to emphasize for other people. That optimization, I concede. This is like my concession, like my balance concession. I concede optimization and efficiency is nearly essential for obligatory tasks. Food, sleep, job, even family, wherever that line that you draw, right? These are obligatory tasks. The biggest disclaimer I have is when I'm talking about all of these things and how I'm framing it is that you choose to learn a target language. And this choice is not necessary. Right? And that underpins most of the points that I'm making. Underpins most of the points that I'm making. I'm talking about things that I observe that allows me to enjoy whatever choice I've made to do something that is not necessary. So when you're hyper focused on optimizing, right? Optimizing efficiency, making the task colorless. Making the task colorless. Objective even. Right? That objectivity creates dullness, but consistency. It creates consistency and results based on obligations. When you choose to learn a target language or choose to learn how to draw, choose to learn how to write like a story, creative writing, you choose to play a video game, that obligation is, I discourage a lot of times that enhanced obligation to turn something you choose that's not necessary into food, sleep, a job, So what I mean by food is not like the act of culinary exploration. I'm talking about like substance, right? Substance. So I tend to try to reiterate on this. When you're choosing to learn a language and you feel like it is a chore, what are the key words that triggers my concern? When you say chore, grind, and I actually use these words, it's kind of clickbaity. I can see that as a little clickbaity, but grind, farm, repetitious, need, best, must, any est word, that is optimizing for obligation. And over time, I can't spell obligation. I just spelled obligationary. I'm gonna keep that. That to me is screaming that this thing has turned into something that is no longer flexible. It's no longer optional. It's a matter of practically life and death. It's a matter of value, self-value. And yes, that then often generates fear. So over time, when someone becomes attached to the language, the target language that I have, their fear is born out of that obligation, in my opinion. Like, oh my gosh, dang it, I should have reached JLPT 3 by year 2. Like, oh, I'm so stupid. Like, I just wasted like 6 months of my life. Now I have to like go look and relearn 6 months of my life. It sounds like that it's no longer something that's providing a choice and a healthy lifestyle for you. And it starts with slowly using grind, farm, best of something. I need to change my habits, certain habits, because a new thing is better. I no longer like this repetition because it feels the same. Now, hear me out. I still think these things happen to me. Like, I still think of these things. However, since I know it's a choice, I choose to focus on being creative. The most paramount thing that I have that supersedes most of this is to keep learning, associate with good feelings. So if you're constantly tired because you keep on trying to learn, then if you're constantly tired, you're constantly associating bad feelings with it. So over time, you're just not going to want to study anymore. You're not going to want to learn. And where does that start a lot of times? Unfortunately for me, it sucks to say this all the time. And I truly do find that I have a short story that I can share about this. When do this stuff happen often when it comes to adults and maybe young adults who tackle language learning? It starts at school. It starts as early as elementary school. And I'm one that one wishful idealism that I have is that when kids are brought into this world, right? Even to the adults of now who are trying to redefine and having a different relationship with learning, which I did not have this relationship, is that school, basically, it can be a hit or miss, and it can condition this already. And what is my short story about this? So when I went to college, I knew that I was underprivileged when I got a chance to get to college. And what I mean by that is when I went to high school, I actually started elementary school in a really terrible environment. Like fights, racism, discrimination. I liked school. I did, but I don't like being in school, right? So it didn't really mark for great condition. It's always associated with something bad. Like when I do well in school, when I learn in school, it's constantly associated with something bad that's outside of my control, right? And at some point in middle school, my family managed to get better resources. So then things kind of looked up. We went to a better school system. But this still happened. Racism, ostracizing still happened, but it's looking better, and I like going to school, right? I had bullies and all that stuff. Then high school rolled around, and it got a little better. Still, bullies and racism still persist. Then I got to college, and it was one of my first opportunities where I met and changed things. My status reset, right? It kind of reset. So I tried openly, realized that I can choose and not obligate myself to a matter of self-value. Like I don't have to bring all that baggage of high school, middle school, and elementary school to college. I met people who are still my best friends to this day that have changed my entire personality. The person I am today, who's far more forward thinking and talking openly, expressive, and also very agreeable, because I was a very closed off, bad attitude person when I was younger, because that's how I survive, right? That's how you toughen to not have racism, bullying, and stuff tear you down. Now, that also means I was a very cold person before college. And then I met people who didn't quite experience all of that, but they had values that I adopted, and they're still my best friends to this day. They're practically brothers from another mother. That's another story for another day. So what happened is, in undergrad, I realized that I became very privileged, as in I got the chance, even from an underprivileged background, to go to this college in which I met some of the best friends in my life. So during this time, I get to do outreach to not necessarily elementary schools, but high schools, like high school kids and sometimes middle school kids. So I spend my time, my extracurriculars is to do outreach. Basically, there are schools that may not have the greatest amount of resources, but these are college students that try to give kids in middle school and high school a chance, like the ones that are interested, the ones that still want to go on to college and stuff. And that is where it's bittersweet. It's very, very bittersweet. On the one hand, opportunities are rare, even for these outreach. The statistics, like that 1 out of these 10 students will even have an opportunity to go to college, in which they still like school, have the ability to do school. Like, I'm talking about the American education system. It's not all created equal, right? It's very spurious and varied. This is not an attack on the overall education system or what foreigners think of the education system. It's a mixed bag. There are people who are ahead in life, and there are people who aren't ahead in life. You can be born into a rich family, you can be born into a poor family, right? So the idea is, it's a bittersweet moment. And the reason why it's a bittersweet is, it's awesome that I got to see all these shining middle schoolers and high schoolers. And then I took this to like graduate school as well, and I got even more bittersweet stuff. It's great that there's an opportunity that I could help or encourage people, but then you see the other side of things, where elementary school has already set the conditions, and then middle school set the conditions even more for a lifetime of this stuff. Fear, obligation, due to repetition or the feeling of needing to do something in order to motivate to learn, chores. It goes on. And you might be thinking, okay, well, this is not a problem anymore, right? We got the internet. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of like, if people can get their GEDs, they can graduate high school without even going to high school because you can learn all the information online. That's great up to a point, until I start doing my usual old hat thing and talk about the algorithm and how content creation is being created now. And that's kind of a negative. I don't want to end on this topic, so I'm going to end on a different topic. However, the algorithm, what sells? What is very efficient? What is the technique of good business practice? Unintentional gaslighting, because you're kind or you're some expert who's selling something, is the idea that if I see a product, personally for me, as an experienced person, or like someone who's looking out for something, when I see someone tell me what I fear in order to, when I see a product and it's related based on fear, I start telling myself, like, do I really need it? Is it an obligation? There are a lot of things that fear can promote that can become instilled in a person. And due to the hyper nature of content creation algo to compete for businesses and attention, oftentimes it's things like, this is the best secret that you've never heard of. Oh, if you're doing this, stop right now. Do this instead. Right? Have I wasted 3,000 days of my life using Duolingo? Even the most generous people, and I earnestly believe they are generous, they're kind, they're trying to help, they participate in the algorithm. The algorithm is complicit in the idea that you generate things based on FOMO and fear in order to compete. Yes, it's like a justification, like if you want to inform people, like for example, I could justify, which I haven't, I could title and clickbait as hard as possible with the justification that whatever I do downstream is to educate them to not do that. That's hypocrisy. And I'm not entirely sure if I'm comfortable with that hypocrisy. Some other people, I'm not saying they can't do it. Some of the influencers that I like, they say like, oh yeah, guys, by the way, yes, this title is clickbait. We know this. I want to tell you how I'm compromising, right? Like how I'm exchanging in order to reach and balance things. And if you have a rationale for that, I'm all ears for sure. What I want to emphasize is being aware of this stuff is liberating. It liberates you from fear, right? So when I think of repetition, need, best, fear, grind, most effective, best way of doing things, the only way of doing things, I hope you're not scared to do anything. I'm certainly not scared. The last time someone told me that I was going to ruin my Japanese by starting Duolingo, that person said I had to stick up my butt and say like, why are you so confident? You only spent like 20 days learning Japanese with Duolingo. You don't know how bad it can get. And I'm like, okay. Like, I'm sorry. I don't. So, but one thing I do know is I'm fearless when it comes to choosing to voluntarily do something, right? My life does not depend on my fluency in Japanese. My life does depend on whether you stop badgering me about your own fears, right? Or you could allow me to help you and ease the fear that you feel. Maybe a compliment about how good your Japanese is can help you ditch that fear that you're like throwing in my face all the time. You think too many people, yeah, and then you think people can relate to such experiences. I think so too. I think more than ever, like all the rational things. However, I'm not gonna, for me personally, and it's a crutch and it's an excuse, I concede that, I'm not gonna go and clickbait and try to make this a thing. I think other people are doing it really, really well. I talk about people like Hank Green and John Green all the time. In fact, the most recent Hank Green vlog was about admitting his weakness when it comes to his management about his post-cancer, like trying to stay healthy because he recently fought cancer, successfully fought cancer. So that kind of thing, showing moment of weakness is both impractical, but at the same time practical in this day and age. And yeah, it's that thing. So I wanted to kind of end on that note where tell fear to take a hike when you're doing voluntary stuff, right? When you think you're going to develop a bad habit from something you're volunteering to do, I know what it sounds like. You will start thinking about video games. You'll start thinking about addiction. You'll start thinking about recreational use that leads to abuse, right? Okay. With all that in mind, those are some incredibly scary and specific examples of poor habit formation. And my catch 20 or 22 or however you call it, catch 22 or catch 20 about this is, how do you work on that? How do you know when you're developing a bad habit? How do you know when you're going down a hill? You practice. Like, yes, there's a lot of people out there like myself. I would say take all my stuff with a grain of salt, right? This is to raise the many possible permutations of seeing this happen. The idea is I spend a lot of time doing this, and I want to share that. You can too. You can share your ways of overcoming your habit, and then collectively, the internet might be filled with these kind of things. And one day, or like a really weird utopian vision of problem solving, is the idea that fear might not be the dominant motivation for reinforcing people to do things, right? Especially the weird I often sit in a paradox every time I wake up and say I'm gonna get on Wanikani and I'm gonna blast through this thing. My only thought is I think about all the other people who's saying like they're getting up because they have to study. And like whenever I ask, oh, so what are you doing today? It's like the same thing, it's repetition. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, was there anything interesting that you learned? Because I would be excited to hear that you are excited about something, right? Any word. Give me one word. Like, oh, you don't like how Nai works. Oh, okay. Like, can you tell me why? that kind of thing, right? I think that's an experience. It's also relatable, but it's something rarer than, oh boy, yep, I'm falling behind. Not feeling too good today, but I still gotta crank out these reviews. On Wanikani board, there's no Duolingo thread, but maybe the channel. I typically like read channel video comments and whatnot when in the Duolingo channel. But for Wanikani, I read their forums, and I think overall the community is very positive. However, the ones that are inexperienced tend to voice fears and constant optimization and stuff. Like, for example, one of the recent ones is like, oh, hey guys, I've been using this for 3 weeks and I'm afraid, am I just stupid? Or like I keep getting these things confused. And then, a bunch of community members try to be as comforting as possible. It's like, trust the process. Give it a little bit more time, right? No hurry. You're choosing to learn a language that I hope you don't have to learn, but take your time, right? It might work out. Give it some pep. If you need help, there are people here that might offer you a different perspective. But you get these things all the time, and I think maybe I'm hyper focusing a little. I might be a little bit exaggerating. To close off all of this, right? To close off all of this. I genuinely say that most of the things I share and stuff, I share with the ideas like you gotta kick, right? Kick fear in the face. Not Duolingo, but maybe Duo in the face. Like figuratively, you know? You could even think about it as like Duo, it actually embodies all the fear for Duolingo users, right? Cue the meme of like Duo like kidnapping, right? Kidnapping your parents, right? It's a joke, obviously. Like take this with a grain of salt. It's a joke, but the idea is it does work, and I even think a duo is one of the sources of that, but they try to make it into a humor. This fear, turning fear into humor for something voluntary, is great. I think that's a step towards a different direction. It does highlight that the fear still exists. However, I'm not gonna stop doing these reviews. I'm gonna have to do this all over again, by the way. Tomorrow is a rest day, but I'm gonna do all of this for Duolingo Chinese again, right? Because I still have the 100-day interim report on the 200 days of Chinese and actually the completion of the Chinese course. So it's gonna be a little different for the Chinese course. For Japanese, we still have like 8 months more of if not a year, before we get to the end of the course. So it's not the end for Duolingo Japanese, but it might be sparingly different for Duolingo Chinese, which I will talk about later. It takes a long time to learn a language, so it's important to enjoy the process. It really is. It really is, both up and down. If someone tells me they have a bad habit, okay, here's a personal challenge, and I'm not saying I'm guaranteeing this. If you have a bad habit in a language, in a target language, you know, someone, future person, if you are struggling with a bad habit, right? If you think it's a bad habit and you think it can only be a waste of time, I would love to hear it. Write it down, or you know, leave a comment, I guess. Um, uh, Talking about it, being aware of it, understanding the nature of it with anyone, your friend, your family, it becomes valuable in the long run. I think I want to echo this with a positive note from several successful people. Like they're not supposed to represent all successful people, but several successful people. They have different versions of this type of quote. You don't make mistakes if you learn from them. They are not mistakes if they lead you to your future success. Much like developing a bad habit, if developing a bad habit allows you to practice the skills in order to carb, modify, and relearn a habit, then is a habit worth having at some point. So, if you never have a bad habit, how do you know what a bad habit is? Right? So, fear, be gone. Kick fear in the face and tell yourself, at least in my opinion, if you don't have someone really close, who knows? I'm not a miracle worker, right? However, I could at least tell you one thing, or try to tell you a couple things, maybe, if you have time, that might be something to spin the bad habit into something else. I can tell you, burning out with my love of science is technically was a bad habit, and now I champion it with fond memories and use it as a learning experience, right? Humans work brilliantly. You become, in my opinion, one is likely to become exponentially happier, more productive, consistently with long process-oriented skill building, like learning a language, when equipped with the ability to micromanage fear, especially with voluntary things. So we'll end with that, right? And of course, with proper things, we can always go back and look at what we've done in 3 days, right? I think one really great slide would be this one. Look at this. This is Duolingo in... Okay, I am missing like a couple days. Yeah, I'm missing like 20 days. But this is what Duolingo in 100 days kind of look like. At least my 100 days. Along with like this slide. right at the top. We still have like 7 or 6 other units. So, hey, if I'm learning slow, you can learn faster, right? If you think you can learn faster, do it. I want to hear about it. All the people who told me about like how I would fail to learn anything from Duolingo, that's perfectly fine. That'll be my problem, right? I don't have any concerns if I don't learn anything, because I'm not focused on that. However, if you think you can learn faster, prove me wrong. That's absolutely like I mean, I'm not even saying you're wrong or anything, but if you want to prove that if me using Duolingo makes you angry and you want to prove that you can learn faster, do it, right? And I want to hear it. I want to hear about it. Like, I'd rather be wrong and see another person, and not like, again, I don't know what the competition is, but if it makes you feel nice to know that you're faster than someone else, I'm perfectly a person who's far more welcomed in knowing that and being happy for you. So having a friend that's happy for you, or even a vicarious personality who's always happy for you for doing things better than them, that's I'm here for that. Like, I have no qualms with someone coming up to me and say, I did this better than you. It's like, darn straight you did, because that's what it's all about. And when you do something better, maybe it'll convince me to do something better, right? If I can do this, then I hope there are many people out there who can do something more than this. This took me less than 3 days. So, but hear me out. I don't want to like make it sound like this is 100 days. So, and then this is actually 300 days stacked on top of each other. So I don't want to make it sound like it happened overnight, but this is a culmination of more than 300 days. And this is not 300 days exclusive, because I did 200 days of Duolingo Chinese while reforming the things I do in Japanese, right? So it's a culmination of hundreds of thousands of hours that I enjoyed. So when someone hears, oh my gosh, 1,000, like 2,000, 3,000 hours, that sounds like a long time. It's not a long time when you really, really like it. When you enjoy it, you know what you're working on, and things look cool. I hope that's good enough of a message. I am really, really tired, and I could go on, but my voice is going to give out. So that will be probably my message to wrap up Duolingo Japanese's 300-day, 100-day progress report. I'm going to not do anything like this tomorrow, and then we're going to be back with another 3 days. And it's going to be doing this all over again with Duolingo Chinese. And I have different stories. I've built different stories and different talking points for Chinese. Some of the stuff might overlap with Japanese, but we'll see. So, thank you again for hanging out. And thank you, by the way. I don't usually have people who go that late, but I really appreciate your little commentary on the side. It's nice to know that you can spread. I hope you get a chance, an opportunity to spread encouraging things to other people. It's an uphill battle. I would say business and influencers capitalize on other things. So one person at a time, right? So until next time, I'll be back tomorrow. Wanikani Hanzahiro only for tomorrow, so I can take a break. And we'll do this again. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, right? If you're gonna watch this later, arigatou gozaimasu, right? Minasan, mata ne, ja ne. And take care, stay safe. Bye bye.